If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 101. This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 101. If you think tomorrow's too soon, Ayaka, we can wait a bit longer. I'll be around in Ajima for a while, so just let me know when you're ready, Luo Qing said casually. It's fine, Ayaka shook her head firmly. Tomorrow is perfect. She had rehearsed everything she wanted to say to the Shogun countless times in her mind. Even if she had to meet Raiden Shogun right now, she wouldn't hesitate for a second. Alright, then. Tomorrow evening, after training, I'll take you to meet her. Okay, Ayaka nodded. With that settled, there was nothing left to discuss but personal matters between the two of them. Although it had been a while since they last spoke, Luo Qing's casual attitude with Ayaka hadn't changed a bit. They chatted about the recent happenings and even her personal interests. He noticed how interested she was in the group dance, even encouraging her to suggest it to her busy brother. After all, the more people dancing together, the more lively it would be. Several times, Ayaka tried to bring up the incident where Luo Qing had almost kissed her, but every time she got close, Luo Qing managed to change the topic, leaving her questions unanswered. Before she knew it, night had fallen. Though Ayaka hadn't said anything, Luo Qing knew well enough that their relationship wasn't yet at a point where they could spend the night together. So, he found a polite excuse and headed back to his lodgings. The next day. Just like the first day, the morning training began with an hour of group dance practice. With Luo Qing's oversized phonograph blasting its catchy tunes, the music echoed throughout Tenshukaku. Some of the residents of Hanamizaka could even faintly hear the infuriatingly catchy song, but given that it came from the shogun's residence, they could only complain in private and curse Luo Qing in secret. Sword training wasn't like classroom teaching, it didn't require Luo Qing's constant presence. He only needed to step in occasionally to provide guidance. Most of the time, the students would train independently while Luo Qing enjoyed his tea on the platform, stealing glances at Ayaka's enthusiastic dance moves. If only the new athletic uniforms were ready, it would be even more thrilling. By now, the students were able to practice on their own. Luo Qing left Teresa and Kyujao Sera in charge, activating his Time Zero ability to once again slip up to Tenshukaku. Perhaps because it was Ei herself who crafted the body, the Raiden Shogun had a habit of staying indoors. Every time Luo Qing visited her at Tenshukaku, she was seated alone, meditating quietly on the dais. Why do you always have to sneak in through the balcony? Raiden Shogun asked with a frown, wondering if she should teach him a lesson to make him use the front door next time. Isn't the balcony more exciting? Luo Qing grinned as he casually sat down in front of her. What do you want this time? Raiden Shogun's voice was cold. Every time Luo Qing visited, it was either to seek Ei's help or to ask for a favor. One of these days, she'd just cut him down with her blade. The eldest daughter of the Kamisato clan wants to meet with you. She asked for my assistance. She should have formally requested an audience through the Tenryu Commission, not used you as an intermediary, Raiden Shogun replied coolly, her eyes remaining closed. She knew exactly who Luo Qing was referring to. I already promised her. It's just a quick meeting, why not? No. Luo Qing was in a tough spot. He had already touched Ayaka's cheek, almost kissed her, and if he broke his promise now, any goodwill he'd built up would vanish instantly. Just meet with her. Don't make me beg. No means no. Raiden Shogun's eyes suddenly flickered, and then her expression softened as she smirked. Humph, then why don't you go ahead and beg? She teased. Luo Qing was stunned for a moment. Wait, are you Ei? She won't come out. I'm speaking on her behalf, Raiden Shogun said, her voice still stern. Don't pretend. The Shogun always refers to herself as this body, but you just said you're definitely Ei. Luo Qing declared loudly. Ha, Miss Ei, you wouldn't want your secret excursions from the plane of Euthymia to be exposed to your foxy friend, would you? Luo Qing said with a sly grin, leaning back. I'm not her. She insisted. Stop denying it. Luo Qing countered. Ei frowned, realizing that Luo Qing could discern the difference between her and the puppet from just a single slip. Was she really that obvious? What did she offer you to make you so willing to help? Ei asked, her tone cold. You do know you're working with a foreign organization, right? Aligning with outsiders like this could have serious consequences, she warned. Are you jealous? Luo Qing asked, his voice softening. For a moment, Ei was at a loss for words. Jealous of a little girl over this scoundrel? She thought incredulously. Why is Luo Qing so confident all of a sudden? Oh, come on. It's just a meeting, it won't kill you, Luo Qing said, his tone coaxing. Next time, I'll bring you some fresh light novels, good ones that will make you cry and laugh. It was true that she had already read through all the novels in the plane of Euthymia, but admitting it no, she couldn't. She wasn't here to lounge around reading novels. Seeing the hint of hesitation in her expression, Luo Qing pressed on, I'll even include the updated volumes you haven't read yet, plus all the latest desserts. And I promise I won't let the pink-haired fox find out. Ei hesitated, a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks. Couldn't Luo Qing be a little more subtle? What if the shogun overheard such shameless bargaining? Fine. Seeing her expression waver, Luo Qing knelt down, pressing his forehead to the floor in a perfect prostration. I humbly beg the shogun to grant Kamisato Ayaka an audience. He said, his voice loud and sincere. All she needed was a graceful way to agree, he knew that well. Ahem, since you're so sincere. Luo Qing's head shot up. You'll do it, Miss Ei. Her sentence interrupted, Ei's brows furrowed. As she suspected, Luo Qing didn't have a sincere bone in his body. Don't be so eager. The one she'll meet is the shogun, not me, she said icily. Doesn't matter. She won't know the difference, Luo Qing said dismissively. In any case, the shogun seems to like Ayaka just as much as you do, he thought. One thing though, what's your relationship with the Kamisato girl that makes you so determined to help her? Ei asked, curiosity coloring her voice. Don't ask. Just call me Ayaka's loyal dog, Luo Qing replied with a grin. Chapter 102, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 102. Evening came, signaling the end of training. After the students finished their usual hour of group dance, Luo Qing dismissed them to rest. He exchanged a glance with Ayaka, and the two quietly left the Tenryou commission together. Earlier, after his visit to Tenshukaku, Luo Qing had informed Ayaka that she would be able to meet with Raiden Shogun that evening. Although Ei had agreed, she also imposed a condition: Ayaka had to go alone. Luo Qing would not be allowed to stay during their conversation. Because of this, Luo Qing simply gave Ayaka a few words of encouragement and let her head up by herself. On Ayaka's side, despite having mentally prepared herself the previous night, her heart still fluttered with nerves when she found out that she would truly have the opportunity to request the abolishment of the Vision Hunt decree directly from the shogun. Standing at the entrance of Tenshukaku, she took a deep breath, gave Luo Qing a determined nod, and stepped through the towering doors. Since she was young, Ayaka had rarely met the shogun in person. Matters of state were usually handled by her brother, and this was the first time she would have a private audience with the Raiden Shogun. After informing the attendants of her identity, they no longer stopped her as they had in the past. Instead, they gave a respectful bow and led her into the shogun's chamber. When the door opened, the sight before her left Ayaka feeling a bit confused. On the dais sat the legendary Raiden Shogun, her hands poised in a meditative gesture, eyes closed in deep concentration. And beside her, much to Ayaka's surprise, stood Luo Qing, the very person who had been cheering her on just moments before outside the Tenshukaku gate. He seemed to be quietly muttering something to the shogun. I'm telling you, don't be too harsh and don't just stay silent. She's coming here all alone, you know, if you make her cry, it's going to be a mess to comfort her. Don't put on that cold act, just give her some kind of response. Luo Qing was well aware of the shogun's stern and sometimes harsh demeanor. Knowing her straightforward personality, he felt it necessary to offer a bit of advice and support for Ayaka's sake. As the door creaked open, Raiden Shogun's eyes flicked open, casting a glance at Luo Qing, as if to ask, what are you still doing here? Remember what I said? Luo Qing urged one last time, before reluctantly exiting the room. He exchanged a reassuring nod with Ayaka as he passed her, then walked out. As the door closed behind him, Ayaka turned her gaze back to the shogun, who had now risen from her seat, standing above her with the imposing presence of a god overseeing her people. What is it? Those two simple words carried an overwhelming weight, causing Ayaka's chest to tighten. Even breathing seemed difficult under such pressure. But she had come this far, there was no turning back. Taking a deep breath, Ayaka straightened up and said firmly, Shogun, I have come here to request the abolishment of the Vision Hunt decree. The core of their discussion was the abolishment of the Vision Hunt decree, touching on political matters at the top and the lives of the common folk below. In Ayaka's mind, the shogun had to have been influenced by the Tenryou Commission and the Kenjo Commission to enact such a decree. If she could honestly convey the suffering and pain it had caused the people, perhaps she could persuade the shogun to cancel it, restoring the peace of their past. But soon enough, she realized that the Vision Hunt decree was not the result of manipulation from the Tenryou or Kenjo Commission. It was the shogun's own decision. She was well aware of the decree's consequences, yet chose to persist. Luo Qing stood outside the door, listening intently. Thanks to his enhanced senses, he didn't need to press his ear against the wall to hear the conversation inside. As Ayaka's voice grew quieter and more uncertain, laced with hints of desperation, he knew the discussion was nearing its end. He wasn't particularly surprised by the outcome. If the shogun could be swayed by Ayaka's words alone, then there would be no need for Lumen or that cunning fox to get involved later. Soon after, a stern reprimand echoed from the shogun's chamber, signaling the conclusion of their dialogue. The attendant beside Luo Qing pushed the door open and stepped inside. Through the crack, Luo Qing could see Ayaka's slumped shoulders. Her posture alone spoke volumes about her despair. He glanced up at the shogun, who remained as aloof as ever, her expression unreadable, as if she bore no responsibility. The shogun had dismissed them, and Ayaka, acknowledging her failure, bowed deeply and left the room with the attendant. As she turned around, Luo Qing noticed the faint trace of a tear clinging to the corner of Ayaka's eye. Damn, she really cried. Honestly. Luo Qing shot a reproachful glance at the shogun, thinking, I told you to go easy on her. How could you end up making her cry? Master, let's go back. Ayaka's head hung low, her pale blue bangs hiding her eyes. It was impossible to tell if her emotions were more rooted in disappointment or pain. All right. Luo Qing glanced one last time at the shogun, silently vowing to settle this score later. Outside Tenshukaku, they passed the statue of the omnipresent god. Ayaka couldn't help but look back at it. Master, do you think the shogun's Vision Hunt decree is truly right? What do you think, Ayaka? Luo Qing asked in return. I don't understand what the shogun means by eternity. All I see is how the Vision Hunt decree has turned so many lives upside down, how people have even lost their lives because of it. Even now, she struggled to grasp why the shogun clung so stubbornly to the decree. Why were visions seen as a threat to eternity? They had existed for so long already. So, Ayaka, you still wish to bring down the Vision Hunt decree, don't you? Yes, but I don't know what to do anymore. The shogun's expression during their conversation, along with the opposition she'd faced from the Tenryou and Kenjo commissions, left Ayaka feeling lost. She had once believed the decree's true enemies were the Tenryou and Kenjo commissions. Now she understood her greatest adversary was the shogun herself. Don't lose hope. Luo Qing gently ruffled Ayaka's hair. I've seen a sign. In the not-so-distant future, a traveler from Liyue will arrive in Inajima. She'll stand by your side and help bring down the Vision Hunt decree. A sign? A traveler. Remembering the shogun's unyielding stance, a flicker of doubt and sadness crossed Ayaka's face. Do you truly believe there will be a day when the Vision Hunt decree is overturned? Absolutely. My predictions have never been wrong. Luo Qing gave her a comforting smile, ruffling her hair a little more. A traveler from Liyue. Ayaka lowered her head, her thoughts swirling with uncertainty. Translator's note. Hi, peasants. I'm so excited to share Star Rail, starting with a lyre, living off busking. Our favorite carefree bard, Venti, takes center stage in this Honkai, Star Rail adventure, landing in Belobog, the last bastion of preservation on Gerilo 6. With the fire inside fading and winds growing stagnant, can the spirit of freedom and the breeze of change rise once more? If you're a fan of Genshin Impact or Honkai, Star Rail, you're gonna love this one. There's music, rebellion, and all the freedom-loving energy Venti brings to the table. Also, I've got 2 more stories lined up after this, so keep an eye out. As always. Chapter 103, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 103. Inside the Shivyukyo headquarters. Finally done with the endless documents piling up from the Shivyukyo's daily reports, Ayato Kamisato stretched his arms and prepared to take a short break before handling the next round of external affairs. Suddenly, a small hooded figure leapt gracefully through the wide-open window, landing steadily in front of him. Seiyu. Ayato blinked in surprise. Hadn't he assigned this little ninja to follow his sister? Why had she returned? Did something happen to Ayaka? Ayato asked, concern clear in his voice. Seiyu hesitated for a moment, carefully choosing her words before responding in a calm tone, Miss Ayaka, she's with that Luo Qing guy now. Ayato's mind went blank, confusion spreading across his face. What do you mean with? You better explain yourself. Take your time, Seiyu. Start from the beginning and tell me everything, he urged, trying to stay calm. Well, it's like this. Seiyu took a deep breath, reorganizing her thoughts. She then detailed how the Raiden Shogun had called for a sword training session, revealing that the mysterious swordsman was Luo Qing, and that Ayaka had been publicly pulled into a very close embrace by him. I see, Ayato murmured, stroking his chin thoughtfully, his brows furrowed. He understood his sister's personality well. If Ayaka felt no fondness for someone, she would never tolerate such ambiguous behavior, much less blush about it. He glanced at the discs Luo Qing had sent him. Ayato had envisioned numerous scenarios in which Luo Qing might approach his sister, but this was not one of them. Ayato trusted in Ayaka's character. She was not one to develop feelings for someone so casually, and certainly not a man who had pulled her into his arms without hesitation. If she had responded this way, it could only mean one thing: Luo Qing already held a significant place in her heart. But how had Luo Qing managed it? Hadn't he sent Seiyu to warn Ayaka? This wouldn't do. No matter what, he had to go to Inajima City himself and meet this Luo Qing in person. Banma, Ayato called out, and moments later, a bespectacled young man stepped into the room. You called, Master Kamisato. While I'm away, I want you to manage the affairs of the Shivyukyo. Master Kamisato, you're leaving? Yes, Ayato nodded, his eyes reflecting a determination. I'm heading to Inajima City. A week later. Today was a day Luo Qing had eagerly awaited. After what seemed like an eternity, Kurasan had finally delivered the much-anticipated set of training outfits. Just seeing those blue shorts and white form-fitting tops made him envision Ayaka under the sun, moving with grace. That morning, Luo Qing called the students to gather at the training grounds half an hour earlier than usual. The young swordsmen, their faces puzzled, watched as Luo Qing gestured for Teresa and Qiuzhao Sarah to hand out the training outfits. They were confused as they held the unique-looking clothing in their hands, unsure of Luo Qing's intentions. All right, everyone, Luo Qing announced with a broad smile, from today onward, whenever we do our warm-up exercises, you'll be required to wear these training outfits. The announcement left the students in shock. The boys were more or less unfazed. Their outfits were simple and straightforward, just shorts and a short-sleeved top. It wasn't anything unusual for them. But for the girls it was a different story. The snug shorts and tight tops made them blush just by looking at them. For the traditionally modest Inajima girls, Luo Qing's training outfits felt a bit too revealing. Wearing them in private was one thing, but standing in the middle of the training grounds, surrounded by so many people, made them all feel shy. But Qiuzhao Sarah's earlier decree echoed in their minds: Luo Qing's commands were to be followed without question. So, despite their embarrassment, they gritted their teeth and put on the outfits. Among them, Ayaka Kamasato's thoughts were different from the other girls. When she first saw the training outfit, a suspicion crept into her mind. Could it be that Luo Qing specifically wanted to see me in this outfit but was too shy to ask directly, so he made everyone wear it? Ayaka looked at the garment in her hands, then stole a quick glance at Luo Qing. Their eyes met. There's no need to guess anymore, she thought. He must have designed these outfits just to see her wear them. Ayaka's face grew warm as she buried her head in the fabric, debating whether or not to put it on. Ever since the ice had been broken between them, she and Luo Qing had become closer, visiting the Komor tea house together almost daily, speaking freely about anything and everything. It had reached a point where she no longer felt uncomfortable when Luo Qing occasionally pinched her cheeks or playfully tousled her hair. She'd always rationalized it as harmless teasing between friends, nothing more. But holding this outfit in her hands made her doubt that interpretation. Deep down, there was a part of her that wanted to put it on just to ask Luo Qing if she looked good in it. Having read plenty of romance light novels since childhood, she was familiar with these kinds of feelings and what they might signify. But Luo Qing was with the Fatui. Could she really allow herself to feel this way? After a long moment of hesitation, Ayaka looked up at Luo Qing with a sudden, determined expression. She gave him a gentle smile, nodded, and then hurried off to the changing room, clutching the outfit to her chest. What was that about? Luo Qing scratched his head, puzzled by Ayaka's fleeting smile. Why did she look so solemn about putting on the training outfit? Just as he was pondering, the door to the changing room opened again. Ayaka stepped out, dressed in the light blue, form-fitting shorts. The white, snug top accentuated her graceful curves, with her dainty white socks tied with red ribbons at the back. Her cheeks were tinged with a rosy blush, and she avoided meeting Luo Qing's gaze. Luo Qing's breath hitched as he took in the sight. Absolutely adorable. Cute girls truly shine in training outfits. If only she could step on me a few times or sit on my lap. No, stop thinking like that. When everyone had finished changing, the boys finally realized the true intention behind their master's directive. This was it, Master Luo Qing's true goal revealed. The girls present were all dedicated swordswomen, their figures toned from years of training. Every single one looked stunning in the training outfits, capturing the boys' attention and leaving them slack-jawed. Calling him master suddenly didn't feel like a bad deal at all. Chapter 104, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 104. Another day of training had come to an end. It turns out that the essence of humanity is, indeed, to be a fan of attractive people. With the addition of the new training outfits, Luo Qing noticed something peculiar. The male trainees no longer produced any frustration value while dancing to the square dance routines. Every time it was time for the dance session, they all wore the happiest expressions, practically wishing they could add a few more hours to the routine. When the male trainees were happy, the frustration value wouldn't accumulate. And when there was no frustration value, it was Luo Qing's turn to feel dissatisfied. So, he planned to devise a new strategy to give these eager trainees some fresh experiences. But those plans would have to wait until tomorrow. Right now, he had to wait for Ayaka Kamisato to change out of her training clothes so they could go to the Komor tea house together. He stood patiently by the Thousand Arms, Hundred Eyes statue until Ayaka emerged, wearing her usual ceremonial attire. They exchanged a glance, and Ayaka walked up to Luo Qing with a gentle smile, speaking softly. "Thank you for waiting, Master." Let's go," he said with a nod. By now, their routine of walking together at dusk had become a comfortable habit. Almost every evening after training, they would spend time together at the Komor tea house. But today, Ayaka's mood seemed different from the previous days. When they reached the tea house, they sat across from each other as usual. After making sure the door was securely shut and repeatedly reminding Kaji to knock before entering, Ayaka cast a sideways glance at Luo Qing before glancing at the neatly folded training outfit beside her on the tatami. "Master, did you design this training outfit?" she asked softly. Ayaka had always enjoyed trying on different types of clothes, but she had never encountered such a bold and modern design. "Oh? You figured it out already?" Luo Qing teased, grinning. As expected, nothing escapes Ayaka's keen eye. "It's just a lucky guess," she replied, lowering her head slightly, surprised that he admitted it so easily. "Do you have a particular interest in fashion, Ayaka?" Luo Qing asked, resting his chin on his hand with a soft smile. "Not especially, but Inazuma's traditional attire can get repetitive. Sometimes, I wonder what clothes from other nations might look like," Ayaka said quietly, her gaze drifting again to the folded training outfit. After 2 hours of dancing earlier, the outfit now bore faint traces of her sweat. She planned to wash it herself once Luo Qing left. Though she couldn't quite explain why, Luo Qing had a strange habit of always wanting to take a whiff of it. "Really? What a coincidence," Luo Qing said, leaning back a little. "I have a bit of an interest in fashion myself." He might have left out the fact that his fashion interest covered a wide array, everything from sheer stockings to maid outfits and gothic Lolita dresses. "Ah, really? What style do you like, Master?" Ayaka asked, a hint of excitement sparking in her eyes. Despite her usual poise, she couldn't hide the slight thrill that comes with discussing a shared interest. Luo Qing smiled mischievously, his gaze locking onto hers. "If I tell you, will you wear it for me, Ayaka?" Ayaka's face flushed pink as she ducked her head, the question catching her off guard. I don't even know what style you like, Master," she stammered. "Well, that's easily solved." With a quick thought, Luo Qing reached into his system's inventory and pulled out a small booklet. Ever since he gave Karasan the design for the training outfits, he had been inspired to sketch out several more clothing ideas, designs that would be perfect for various scenarios. He'd even considered having Karasan create the entire collection just to keep them on hand, just in case. Every night after returning home, he would stay up drawing, much to Teresa's amusement, who sometimes watched in amazement as he sketched. "That's quite the talent, Lord Luo Qing," she had remarked more than once. Your creativity is something else. Of course, those illustrations weren't all suitable for showing Ayaka. They ranged from innocent to quite risque. Take a look at this, Luo Qing said, handing the booklet to Ayaka. See if there's anything you like. Hey! Ayaka hesitated, not sure where the booklet had come from. She opened it gently, only to be greeted by a series of designs featuring girls in a variety of styles. There were frilly lace dresses, knee-high socks paired with pleated skirts, and short shorts with crop tops, each page showcasing a different look, each more daring than the last. Her eyes widened, realizing just how imaginative these designs were. But as she flipped through the booklet, Ayaka noticed something odd. The models in the illustrations bore an uncanny resemblance to herself, not just the hairstyle but the figure, even the chest size. She sneaked a peek at Luo Qing from the corner of her eye, recalling his earlier words. If I tell you, will you wear it for me? Was Luo Qing hinting that he wanted to see her in the clothes from this booklet? She could feel her cheeks growing warmer. They're very nice. Some of them I really like, Ayaka said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. She feared he might ask her to try them on right away. If you like them, consider the booklet a gift, Luo Qing said with a cheerful smile. Hey! Ayaka looked down at the booklet in surprise, confused by his sudden generosity. Was he really not going to ask her to try anything on? Something wrong? He asked. No, it's nothing. Thank you, Master, she replied. Well, in that case, Luo Qing said, rubbing his hands together excitedly, don't you think it's only fair to give me a little something in return, Ayaka? Hey! Her mind went blank for a moment. I knew it. With Luo Qing's personality, he'd never let things end so simply. Could it be, does he want me to wear the clothes in the booklet for him, as a way to repay him? This is If it were a stranger making such a demand, she would refuse without hesitation. But when it came to Luo Qing, her usual composure seemed to evaporate, her usual social graces faltering. How about you let me pinch your cheek one more time as a reward? Luo Qing said playfully. Yet. Ayaka blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected request. After all that, he just wants to pinch my cheek again? Ever since the first time he had pinched her face, Luo Qing had found various excuses to repeat the gesture, and she had fallen for it every single time. Would that be okay? Luo Qing pressed. Ayaka hesitated. She genuinely liked some of the designs in the booklet and wanted to study them more closely. If the only price was letting Luo Qing pinch her cheek again, she figured it wouldn't be too bad. After all, it wasn't the first time. Oh okay, but this time, please don't do it so hard, she said softly. Don't worry, I'll be gentle, Luo Qing reassured her with a grin. With that, Ayaka nodded, closing her eyes and tilting her face upward towards him. Meanwhile, outside the Komor tea house, Kaji, the hostess, stood by the entrance, humming a little tune to herself. The joy inside the room was clearly not hers to share. As she contemplated what late-night snack she might enjoy at Hanamizaka after work, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Lord Kamisato! What are you doing here? She exclaimed, shocked to see him. T/N, it's over, we're back to new names, I'm not even gonna change it just to show how fucking ridiculous this is. Hi, besties. I'm so excited to bring you I Don't Want to Be a Heroic Spirit, a wild and fun adventure where our MC gets to travel through different anime worlds while becoming a heroic spirit. With the help of Chaldea's MVPs, yes, Mash and Da Vinci are here to cheer us on. This story is full of iconic moments, unexpected twists, and all the anime goodness we love. Oh, and guess what? I've got one more story to share after this, so stay tuned because the fun doesn't stop here. As always, thank you so much for reading and supporting, you're all amazing. Hope you enjoy every moment of this journey. Chapter 105, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 105. Master, why didn't you inform us of your arrival? We could have sent someone to greet you. Seo spoke respectfully, her gaze occasionally drifting towards the Komor tea room. She was well aware of the orders that Ayato had sent through Seo. At this moment, not only had their lady failed to follow the master's orders, but she had also taken things a step further, spending every day glued to Mr. Luo Qing in the tea room. And now, with the master showing up unannounced. This was straight out of one of those dramatic love light novels from Yae Publishing House. I came to Inajima City for some business. I heard that Ayaka has been highly regarded by the Shogun and selected for some sort of special training team, so I thought I'd stop by and see her. Is she inside? Kamisato Ayato spoke softly. Ah well. Seo hesitated. She knew that right now Ayaka and Luo Qing were most definitely entangled in the tea room. If she led the master in there, it would definitely lead to a big problem. On one hand was the master, and on the other, her beloved lady. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Seo, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Ayato asked gently. Just from her expression, Ayato already had his answer. Not only was Ayaka in the tea room, but that guy, Luo Qing, was certainly in there as well. He felt anxious, very anxious. I'm fine, thank you for your concern, master. Finally, Seo made up her mind to stand by the master's side. Resolving herself inwardly, she bowed respectfully to Ayato and said, Master, the young lady is resting inside. I'll take you to see her right away. With that, Seo, as if bravely facing a noble sacrifice, opened the door to the Komor tea room for Ayato. Upon entering, they turned right, following the wooden corridor down to the end where Ayaka and Luo Qing's room was located. In the otherwise quiet hallway, Ayato's footsteps sounded particularly heavy. Upon reaching their door, before he could even knock, the sound of a conversation between a man and a woman could be heard from inside. It hurts master, is it still not done? Almost done, Ayaka, just hang in there a little longer. Ayato's brows furrowed deeply. What on earth were the two of them doing in there? Without hesitation, Ayato pushed open the door to the room with a grand gesture, while Seo covered her eyes, too scared to look at what was happening inside. The next moment, they saw Ayaka kneeling on a tatami mat, her head tilted back, her fair, delicate face being gently massaged by a pair of large hands. From her expression, it seemed like she was even enjoying it. Ah, so it was just a face massage. No. A face massage was still not okay. Seo, didn't I tell you to knock before entering it? Brother. In an instant, the atmosphere in the room froze. Ayaka's pupils widened in disbelief at the scene before her eyes. She glanced at Ayato's tightly furrowed brow, then at the hands of Luo Qing still cupping her cheeks. Her face immediately flushed crimson, all the way to her ears, and she wished the ground would swallow her whole. Exchanging a glance with Luo Qing, she motioned for him to retract his hands. Hastily standing up, Ayaka lowered her voice and said, Brother, why are you here? Inside, Ayaka was filled with regret. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have agreed to Luo Qing's request earlier. I had some business in Inajima City, so I thought I'd drop by to see you. And this is... Ayato spoke softly, his eyes narrowing as he stared directly at Luo Qing. If looks could kill, Luo Qing would have been shredded to pieces by now. He. Ayaka hesitated, wondering whether she should hide Luo Qing's identity from her brother. But before she could decide, Luo Qing smiled slightly and stood up, politely introducing himself. I am Luo Qing, a merchant from Snezhnia, and also the swordsmanship instructor appointed by the Shogun. You must be Ayaka's brother, Ayato. Ayato was speechless for a moment. This guy really doesn't hold back, does he? So, you are Mr. Luo Qing. Then that disc sent to the Yashiro Commission. Yes, I sent that to you, Ayato. How did you find it? How did I find it? It felt like my ears were assaulted, that's how. The melody was quite unique. It had a certain flair to it. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, Mr. Luo Qing. Ayato's eyes narrowed further as he continued, I wonder, what exactly were you and my sister doing just now? Oh, nothing much. Ayaka and I were just playfully sparring, Ayato, nothing to worry about. Luo Qing smiled. Subtext, yep, exactly what you think. And by the way, we've done this countless times when you weren't around. Ayaka, why haven't you ever mentioned Mr. Luo Qing to me before? Ayato turned his gaze to his sister. In his memory, Ayaka had always been sensible and aware of the bigger picture. She handled the Yashiro Commission's affairs with grace. How had she ended up entangled with someone from the Fatui? Brother Mr. Luo Qing saved me on my way to Inajima. After that, we traveled together, and he shared many things with me. Ayaka replied quietly. She didn't know what else to say. The plan had originally been to finish her training, return to the Yashiro Commission, and then explain everything to Ayato, including the fact that Luo Qing meant her no harm. But now that Ayato had shown up unannounced at the Komor tea room, all her plans had fallen apart. So that's how it is. Ayato smiled slightly and turned his attention back to Luo Qing. Mr. Luo Qing, I have some family matters to discuss with my sister tonight. Would you mind stepping out for a while? No problem at all. Luo Qing waved his hand, smiling as he said, since Ayato has business, I won't take up more of Ayaka's time. He then looked over at Ayaka. See you tomorrow, Ayaka. After all, they had plenty of time. Ayaka would be attending training at the Tenryou Commission tomorrow, and Luo Qing wasn't worried about not seeing her again. Yes, Mr. Luo Qing, goodbye. Ayaka's face flushed as she avoided calling him master in front of her brother. After Luo Qing left, Ayato sighed, sitting down across from Ayaka. He spoke softly. Ayaka, you know who he really is, right? Snezhnia the Fatui, but brother, I trust Mr. Luo Qing. He would never harm me. Ayaka replied quietly, when I was on my way to Inajima, I encountered a group of hilly churls. If not for Mr. Luo Qing and his men coming to my aid, even with my vision, I could have been hurt. So, you trust him? Setting aside whether or not he intentionally set that up to win your trust, you must understand that the Fatui are behind many of the events related to the Vision Hunt Decree. Getting involved with them could spell trouble for the Kamisato clan, and even the Yashiro Commission. Brother, I know, but... Ayaka lowered her head. She wanted to argue, but didn't know what to say. Sigh. Seeing his sister like this, Ayato felt a pang of sadness in his heart. He sighed and shook his head. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon the tracksuit in the corner. His heart sank even further. Chapter 106, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 106. Ayaka, do you like him? Kamisato Ayato glanced at the slightly revealing tracksuit and couldn't understand. What kind of trick did Luo Qing use to make his normally reserved and elegant sister wear something like this? I think I might like him a little. Ayaka lowered her head and whispered softly. Brother, I trust Luo Qing. He really isn't a bad person. Ayato responded thoughtfully, then slowly stood up, glancing at the clothing catalogue on the table. Before father passed, he told me that if you ever found someone you cared for, I should respect your feelings and not interfere too much. So, Ayaka, the choice is entirely yours. Ayato gently patted Ayaka's shoulder and spoke softly. No matter what, as your brother, I will respect your decision. Brother. Ayaka lowered her head in guilt. Her brother was always burdened with governmental duties, and as his sister, she should be helping ease his burdens. But now, because of Luo Qing, she was adding to his worries. Sigh, if only Luo Qing were from Inajima. Seeing Ayaka's silence, Ayato understood. He needed to give his sister some space and time to think things over. After giving a few brief instructions to Seo, Ayato left the Komor tea room, heading back to the Yashiro Commission. It wasn't that he was deliberately trying to prevent his sister from finding love. It was just that, with the Vision Hunt Decree in full swing and Luo Qing's identity being so sensitive, Ayato had to be cautious. As the head of the Kamisato clan and the Yashiro Commissioner, the weight of responsibility on his shoulders forced him to tread carefully, ensuring that the Kamisato clan wouldn't fall into decline again. As soon as he stepped outside, he spotted Luo Qing standing not far away at a small stall, holding 2 cups of bubble tea. Luo Qing waved him over. After a moment of thought, Ayato walked over to him. Care for a cup of grass jelly bubble tea, Ayato? This place makes excellent bubble tea. Ayato looked at the cup of grass jelly bubble tea Luo Qing was offering, and a suspicion arose in his mind. Did Luo Qing know he would come out and was waiting here on purpose? Did he even know about his favorite drink? Thank you, Mr. Luo Qing. Ayato smiled faintly, accepted the tea, and skillfully inserted the straw, taking a sip. After all, this was the Shogun's territory. He didn't think Luo Qing would try to harm him here. The bubbles are indeed quite tasty. After taking a sip, Ayato noticed Luo Qing glancing at the tea room and casually asked. So, you finished your talk with Ayaka? Ayato smiled slightly and probed, is Mr. Luo Qing curious about what we discussed? Just a little curious. Luo Qing shook his head and continued, but there is one thing I'm especially interested in. Would you be willing to enlighten me, Ayato? What is it? Ayato was puzzled. I was wondering what are the Kamisato clan's typical bride price requirements. +1 frustration value from Kamisato Ayato. In all his life, Ayato had never met anyone as bold as this. He had spent so much time exchanging pleasantries with politicians and officials from the shogunate that he was momentarily at a loss for words. After thinking for a bit, he decided to feign ignorance. Why is Mr. Luo Qing suddenly interested in that? Well. Luo Qing smiled tactically and replied in a calm voice. Take a guess. +1 frustration value from Kamisato Ayato. Now, Ayato finally understood. Luo Qing was also a master of playing dumb. How on earth did my sister fall for someone like this? Judging by his skills in pretending to be clueless, there was no telling how many women he had charmed on the side. After some thought, Ayato responded calmly. The Kamisato clan has always valued mutual affection above all, and we've never had any formal bride price requirements. So, I'm afraid I can't answer your question. Ah, I see. Luo Qing let out a sigh of relief and then, smiling again, asked. So, Ayato, do you think I still have a chance? Ayato smiled slightly and asked. Mr. Luo Qing, do you like my sister? At this point, he realized that the usual diplomatic responses he used in the political arena wouldn't work on Luo Qing. The man was just as adept at reading people and playing to the situation. So, Ayato decided to be as straightforward as Luo Qing had been earlier. Ayaka is so adorable, who wouldn't like her? Luo Qing waved his hand and added. All right, Ayato, I have some things to take care of, so I'll leave for now. We'll talk again sometime. Without waiting for a response from Ayato, Luo Qing turned and waved at the second-floor window of the tea room, where Ayaka had been secretly watching. He said his goodbyes to her and walked off toward his own resting place. He knew full well that dealing with someone as politically shrewd as Ayato meant he couldn't follow the usual playbook. Otherwise, he'd quickly fall into one of Ayato's traps. But he had conveyed the message he wanted to deliver. Now, he'd leave the rest to Ayato to figure out. Ritu Port. A large fleet of ships had, after several days of navigating through storm clouds, finally broken through the blockade and arrived at the port of Ritu. The traveler from another world and her floating companion finally set foot on the land of Inajima. Taking advantage of the docking time, the two stood on the deck, gazing at the beautiful islands of Ritu and chatting. Wow, we're finally in Inajima. I wonder what delicious food they have here. Why are you always thinking about food? Don't forget why we came here. Hehe, filling your belly is part of the adventure. Besides, what's the point of visiting a new land if we don't try the local delicacies? Paimon rubbed her belly, her mind wandering back to the word purpose. Speaking of which, you did bring that thing Gomu asked us to deliver to Luo Qing, right? You mean the red ribbon she and Chen he asked us to bring? Why did you suddenly think of that? Ah, I was just looking at the port and got this weird feeling, like that guy Luo Qing has been here before. But didn't he return to Snezhnaya? We're in Inajima now, we're not likely to run into him here, right? I guess you're right. Maybe it was just my imagination. Paimon scratched her head, looking a little puzzled. All right, stop thinking about it. The ship's docking. Let's go. Yet. As the Alcor docked, the two, under Baidu's guidance, finally set foot on the land of Ritu. As soon as they disembarked, a young man with golden hair and dressed in red, who had seemingly been waiting for a while, hurried over to greet them. Finally. The big boss from Liyue, and two stowaways. Oh no, I mean esteemed guests. Chapter 107, this Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 107:30 PS. Bonus chapter. Half a month had passed. The month-long training had finally come to an end, and Luo Qing's days of accumulating frustration value had concluded. Thanks to his special guidance for the male trainees, he hadn't fallen behind in his progress. As of today, he had gathered enough pulls, 80 in total, just enough to draw the item he had been eyeing, the resurrection item. A few days ago, he had received a letter from Liyue, knowing that Lumen had arrived in Inajima. Based on the timeline, she would likely arrive at any moment. Unless absolutely necessary, Luo Qing didn't want to reveal himself to Lumen too soon. Today was the last day of training, and as a final test of Luo Qing's teaching over the past month, Raiden Shogun had ordered a final exam. She would personally reward and appoint those who had successfully mastered the thunder-breathing technique. Thus, Luo Qing planned to step back and remain behind the scenes after today, limiting his contact with Kamisato Ayaka. At dawn, Luo Qing had gathered all the trainees at the training ground. A bolt of lightning flashed, and Raiden Shogun appeared before the trainees. "Shogun, shall we begin now?" Luo Qing respectfully asked the Shogun. Although he usually acted relaxed and casual in her presence, in front of so many people, he knew he had to show the proper decorum. Raiden Shogun glanced at the crowd below, her eyes flashing with a hint of confusion. Wasn't this supposed to be a final exam? Why were they all dressed so oddly? Luo Qing waved his hand grandly and shouted to Teresa, who was standing beside the phonograph, "Music!" Teresa nodded seriously and pressed the play button. The next moment, a bizarre tune echoed through the training grounds of the Tenryou Commission. +1 frustration value from Raiden Shogun. +1 frustration value from EI. Watching the trainees below as they began dancing to the rhythm, Raiden Shogun frowned and looked toward Luo Qing. Her gaze seemed to ask, "This is the result of your month-long training? Don't be impatient, this is just the opening ceremony." Luo Qing said casually, his attention still focused on Kamisato Ayaka within the crowd. Since Kamisato Ayato's visit, the quiet time he had shared with Ayaka in the Komor tea room had disappeared entirely. In recent weeks, there had been no private interactions between them, not even during daytime training sessions. Ayaka was careful around him, and the joyful moments they once shared were no longer. Luo Qing understood that Ayaka was once again caught in a dilemma. So, he wasn't in a hurry. He was willing to wait for her to make her own choice. After a while, the trainees finally finished their dance. They changed into their kendo uniforms and stood in neat rows at the training grounds again. Luo Qing stepped to the front and called out to the crowd, "All right, the exam officially begins now. I will call your names, and you will take the stage in order. First up, Kyujo Keiko." "Present." A young boy stepped out of the crowd, his face filled with nervousness as he walked onto the stage. "All right, begin your demonstration." "Yes." At Luo Qing's command, Kyujo Keiko gripped his long sword tightly, assuming the stance of a sword draw. He focused on the training dummy ahead of him, then slowly closed his eyes, concentrating. In the next moment, his sword left its sheath, accompanied by a faint crackling sound as a deep cut appeared on the dummy. This was today's exam content. The better they could perform the first form of thunder breathing, thunderclap and flash, the better their exam results would be. As one of the most advanced techniques of the thunder breathing style, it wasn't something that could be easily learned. The fact that Kyujo Keiko had managed to produce a thunderous sound when drawing his sword made him one of the top trainees. Next, Komaruzetsu. Meanwhile, thanks to Baidu's help, Lumen and Paimon had finally escaped from Ritu. After several days of travel, they arrived in Inajima. Following Tama's directions, they made their way to the Komor tea room. After handing over their invitation to the hostess, Seo, they were granted entry. The two glanced around the counter, finding no one except for a Shiba Inu with a headband tied around its head. "Where's Toma?" "I'm right here." A voice came from behind the counter. "Hey? Who said that? Was it you?" Paimon stared at the Shiba Inu on the counter, scratching her head in confusion. "It's me, Toma." Paimon was shocked. "Wait, it was really you talking. Come on, Paimon. Toma's just messing with you." Lumen shook her head, thinking how can Paimon be this clueless sometimes? "Hat, you always see right through me, Lumen." Toma chuckled as he stepped out from behind the counter. "Lumen, Paimon, you've finally arrived. Those tests from earlier were just a necessary formality. They were to determine whether I could let you meet my lady, and whether we could become allies. So, can we meet the White Heron Princess now?" "Of course. But before that, there's somewhere else I'd like to take you." "Somewhere else? What place?" "It's something everyone on Narukami Island cannot ignore: the giant statue under construction, the statue of the thousand-armed, hundred-eyed god." A while later, the group made their way through the commercial street of Hanamizaka, arriving in front of the imposing statue of the thousand-armed, hundred-eyed god. "Whoa, such a solemn statue! I thought it would be like Mondstadt's statue of the Inmo Archon. What are those things embedded in it?" "Visions." Paimon was shocked. "Visions? So all the confiscated visions are embedded in that statue?" Toma smiled faintly. "My lady's prediction was spot on. It seems you've already learned about the Vision Hunt Decree." Lumen asked curiously, "Why did the Shogun issue the Vision Hunt Decree?" Just as Mondstadt is the city of freedom, and Liyue is the city of contracts, Inajima is the nation of eternity. Toma then explained in detail the concept of eternity and Raiden Shogun's will to the two of them. By the way, the Shogun is holding a swordsmanship exam at the Tenryou Commission today. The Kamisato clan has participants in the exam as well. I can take you to catch a glimpse of her. Toma suggested casually. This wasn't just a random idea of his, it was Ayaka's instruction. By letting the traveler witness Raiden Shogun's will for herself, she would understand just how cold the Vision Hunt decree truly was. Of course, Toma wasn't going to mention that Ayaka was also participating. Their meeting would come later, not now. This exam allowed family members to observe, and Toma had already hidden his vision, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. After explaining their intentions to the guards at the Tenryou Commission, the group was allowed inside. As family members, they were only allowed to watch from the sidelines. From behind a thick crowd, Lumen and the others looked toward the stage. Suddenly, Lumen noticed one of the figures on the stage. That person looked familiar. Chapter 108, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 108:40 PS. Bonus chapter. That person, if I'm not mistaken. It should be him. But didn't he say he was going back to Snezhnia? Why is he in Inajima? Maybe he lied to us earlier. Lumen and Paimon whispered to each other as they watched Luo Qing's figure on the stage. They didn't notice that standing right beside them, Toma's eyes had widened in shock. In his view, Luo Qing was gently patting the top of Ayaka's head with his right hand, his expression soft and affectionate. And Ayaka, blushing shyly, didn't seem to mind Luo Qing's actions at all. Could it be that what Luo Qing had said before was true? Was he really trying to woo Ayaka? But this was the Kamisato princess. How on earth did he pull this off? +1 frustration value from Toma. Toma's mind was suddenly filled with confusion. He'd been back for several days, yet Ayaka hadn't mentioned anything about Luo Qing. And hadn't he already given a heads up to the clan master? How did Luo Qing still manage to get close to her? Paimon glanced at Toma's face and scratched her head in confusion. Hey? Toma, why do you look like you just swallowed something nasty? Ah? Cough, cough, it's nothing, really. I just happened to see something baffling. Toma forced a smile, sighed, and said to Lumen and Paimon, all right, you've seen the Shogun. We should move on to our next destination. Staying here too long could bring unwanted trouble. Lumen glanced back at the stage, remembering Ganyu's request. She hesitated. Could we wait a little longer? We have a friend over there. A friend from Liyue asked us to bring something for him. Paimon chimed in, yes. We haven't given him Ganyu and Shenhe's gift yet. A friend. For some reason, Toma's unease grew stronger. He's on the stage. Yes, that's right. He's that person right there. Paimon pointed her tiny finger toward Luo Qing's direction. As expected, Toma knew this wouldn't be simple. If he allowed Lumen and Paimon to go over now, Ayaka's presence might be exposed. So, even though he had many questions, he had to follow Ayaka's instructions and lead them away for now. Your current status is rather sensitive. If it's not urgent, could we wait until after this task is over to visit your friend? Hey? But... Don't worry, I know your friend too. I'll arrange for you to meet him quietly later. Toma forced another smile. To get them to leave, he had to pretend he knew Luo Qing. Okay. Lumen, half believing, half doubting, ultimately had no choice but to trust Toma in this unfamiliar land. She glanced back one more time at Luo Qing on the distant stage, then followed Toma out of the Tenryou Commission. Meanwhile, on the other side. From the high platform, Luo Qing had noticed Lumen and her group the moment they entered the Tenryou Commission. But with Ayaka on one side of him and Raiden Shogun on the other, any odd expression on his face might draw unwanted attention. So, he had no choice but to act as if he hadn't noticed them and continue with the final stage of the exam. And, while Toma was watching, he took the chance to gently ruffle Ayaka's hair. Seeing Lumen and her companions leave, Luo Qing felt a sense of relief. If Lumen had stubbornly approached him and encountered Raiden Shogun prematurely, he wouldn't have known how to handle the situation. The final day of the exam concluded. Luo Qing's one-on-one, hands-on training with Ayaka over the past month had paid off. In the end, Ayaka delivered the most flawless execution of the first form of thunder breathing, thunderclap and flash, earning her Raiden Shogun's praise and the privilege of co-creating a new sword style with Luo Qing. However, Ayaka, being a noble daughter raised in the Kamisato tradition and well versed in Kamisato-style swordsmanship, had participated in the training mainly out of duty. What mattered to her wasn't the so-called privilege, but the chance to work together with Luo Qing. But with their relationship at such a sensitive stage, Ayaka couldn't linger around Luo Qing after the exam. After exchanging a few polite words, she returned to the Komor tea room to meet with the traveler. Though she couldn't interact with Luo Qing for now, his words remained in her heart. Knowing that the traveler was coming to Inajima, she began her preparations. She hoped that the traveler could truly help them overturn the Vision Hunt decree. If that day came, maybe her brother wouldn't oppose her relationship with Luo Qing anymore. The month-long training had ended. As of today, Luo Qing had accumulated a total of 8,011 frustration points. With the previous emergency 10 draw, he now had enough for 90 pulls. Though the system seemed unimpressive, at least it didn't suffer from bad luck. Now, Luo Qing was certain he could obtain the resurrection armor without a hitch. Returning to his resting quarters, he pondered where to perform this sacred 80-pull draw. Opening the door, he discovered someone waiting inside. A figure was sitting casually on his tatami mat. "Weren't you supposed to be gone for 2 months? Why are you back already?" Seeing Rosalind lying against the table, flipping through a light novel, Luo Qing calmly asked Teresa to prepare tea and sat down across from her. He glanced at the cover of the novel she was reading. It read, "The Wandering Girl Who Fell in Love with a Noble Knight." "Humph, this safe house isn't exclusively yours. Why can't I be here? This is my room." "What, Lady Rosalind, do you want to sleep here with me tonight?" Luo Qing teased. "Humph, all you can do is run your mouth." After spending so much time with Luo Qing, Rosalind had become immune to his jabs. But she was keeping a mental note. She was just waiting for the day she'd get the chance to punch him hard. Every time Luo Qing teased her, she imagined those words turning into icy flames, destined to burn him one day. "Those old geezers at the commission were easier to deal with than I expected. If it weren't for you, I'd already be on a ship back to Snezhnia, not wasting time reading this garbage light novel. But this is your promise, isn't it, Lady Rosalind?" Luo Qing smiled, his gaze drifting over Rosalina's perfect figure. He had to admit, compared to a naive girl, a mature woman like her had a different kind of charm. If she were to wear a maid outfit. Hiss. "By the way, Lady Rosa, and why did you pledge your loyalty to Her Majesty the Tsaritsa?" "Humph, what does that have to do with you?" "Just curious." "Humph, I don't have time to waste on idle chatter with you. In a month, I won't stay a day longer. If you have any tricks up your sleeve, you'd better act fast." Rosalind shifted her position, settling into a more comfortable posture, and continued. "Now get out. Don't disturb my reading. This is my room. Shouldn't you be the one leaving?" Chapter 109, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable 109.50 PS. Bonus Chapter. As the saying goes, a wise man never argues with a woman. Besides, it wasn't like Rosalind was actually going to spend the night in his room, and he needed a place to perform his card pulls anyway. After giving Teresa a few instructions to keep an eye on Rosalind, Luo Qing left the safe house, intending to find a good spot for his card pulls. On Narukami Island, the Grand Narukami Shrine was considered the prime spot for fortune, but it was too far away, and Luo Qing wasn't about to make that journey. After some thought, he looked at Tenshukaku in the distance and had an idea. On the other side. Ever since the exam had ended, Raiden Shogun had returned to Tenshukaku to meditate. Suddenly, a slight breeze swept past her back. Without turning around, she already knew who it was. Luo Qing, of course. "What do you want now?" "It's been a while since I last saw Ei, and I thought I'd drop by for a chat." Luo Qing placed the light novels and snacks he was carrying to the side, sitting cross-legged before the Shogun. "A chat?" Raiden Shogun glanced at the 2 large bags of gifts, frowning slightly. "How come every time Luo Qing visits, it's either to see Ei or to ask for a favor? He never thinks of bringing me any gifts for a friendly chat." "Yes, exactly." Luo Qing nodded with a smile. "So, can I go in this time?" "Don't worry, I won't take long." Raiden Shogun was momentarily speechless. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a reluctance to let Luo Qing enter. "Hey? What's with that expression?" Noticing her hesitation, Luo Qing leaned forward and teased, "Are you jealous?" "Ridiculous." Raiden Shogun's voice turned cold, why would I be jealous of you? Alright, I understand. I'll make sure to bring you some treats next time. Luo Qing chuckled, unfazed by her frosty demeanor. He spoke gently. If I didn't think you'd overpower me in a fight, I might have given you a comforting head pat right now. +1 frustration value from Raiden Shogun. Raiden Shogun's brows furrowed. Luo Qing's patronizing tone irked her. With a wave of her hand, she threw Luo Qing into the plane of Euthymia. This guy, he's so irritating. She wasn't sure when she'd make up her mind to cut him down. As his vision returned, Luo Qing found himself within the plane of Euthymia. When it came to superstitious card pulls, it was all about making an event of it. And this plane was his stage. Maybe he could hit the jackpot here? As long as he didn't claim his prizes immediately, not even EI would sense the system's presence, so he wasn't worried about being caught. Seriously, you've never cleaned this place, have you? Seeing light novels and dessert boxes scattered haphazardly around, Luo Qing sighed. He walked over to EI, placed the light novels and snacks on the floor, and started tidying up the trash. This disorganized space had a distinct feel of a stay-at-home girl. EI slowly opened her eyes, speaking in a soft voice. These are merely possessions. Their presence here doesn't affect me. That's just an excuse. You're simply lazy. +1 frustration value from EI. Did you bring the latest updates? Ignoring his jab, EI's eyes sparkled with anticipation as she eyed the light novels in the bag like a purple-furred ragdoll cat. I brought all the latest releases. Luo Qing smiled, feeling an overwhelming urge to pat her on the head. If you're that eager, why not go out and buy them yourself instead of always waiting for me? Aren't you anxious? I remain here to pursue the path of eternity. I can't just go out for trivial matters. EI pulled the bag towards her, skillfully sorting the novels in the order of their release. She was determined to seek eternity, and leaving her domain casually would go against that purpose. And she couldn't bring herself to ask the Shogun to buy them for her, so she relied on Luo Qing for the updates. If Luo Qing hadn't come, she wouldn't have known what to do. Ha, so what made you come out last time? Luo Qing asked offhandedly. EI feigned ignorance. Did I? Seeing Luo Qing's eyes fixed on her, she couldn't hold back any longer and mumbled. That time doesn't count, the Shogun made me come out. Luo Qing felt a strange sensation at that moment. Was this really the almighty archon who ruled over Inajima? She was acting like a bashful shut-in. She wasn't like this during my earlier visits. Did I really manage to spoil this girl? After considering it, Luo Qing decided to test his theory. He teased gently. You're acting a bit different today. Different? EI looked puzzled. What's different about me? Cute. +1 frustration value from EI. Why does he keep saying such weird things? If you have nothing else to do, you should leave. EI picked up a light novel, pretending to focus on reading. Hey, who delivers gifts and then gets chased away? Can't I stay a little longer? Luo Qing sat down cross-legged across from her. Was it his imagination, or had she just blushed? Is this girl's defense that weak? I hope I didn't spoil her too much. I'm reading. EI lifted the book, ignoring Luo Qing. Luo Qing's main objective was to find a good spot for his card pulls. Seeing that EI was pretending not to notice him, he decided not to say anything more. He glanced at the deep valley of her chest, swallowed, and silently recited to himself. The Dao is vast, the fragrance eternal. Then, with a focused thought, he opened the card pull interface. Alright, it's up to you. 80 pull draw. Since obtaining the resurrection armor was practically guaranteed, Luo Qing's only concern was how many pulls it would take to get it. Not bothering to watch the animation, he skipped each round without seeing any golden glow, preferring to check the final results all at once. 1 pull 2 3 4 5. 7 consecutive purple lights left Luo Qing feeling numb. Really? Is it going to take the full guarantee? Looks like EI has terrible luck too. Finally, on the last pull, a golden glow appeared, but Luo Qing's face showed little excitement. He slowly opened the rare item list he'd obtained. Guardian Angel, Gold, X1. Affection Enhancement Card Pro Max, Purple, X3. Interstellar Toilet, Purple, X2. Cryovision, Purple, X1. Vision Binding Card, Purple, X1. Chapter 110, this Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 110-100 PS. Bonus chapter. Luo Qing looked over the list of items. His gaze settled on the one labeled Interstellar Toilet. Interstellar Toilet, a gateway to a new world. Once set up, sitting on the toilet allows the user to teleport to any other linked toilet, bypassing any spatial restrictions. Luo Qing was dumbfounded. The items he'd received before were strange, but they had always been within his range of understanding. But this a toilet for teleportation. Was it supposed to flush him away to another dimension? After calming himself down, he glanced at another new item he had received, the Vision Binding Card. Vision Binding Card, upon use, binds the vision currently owned by the host to the target, gifting it to them. This thing counts as a purple grade item? Luo Qing wondered. The system claimed the draws were random, but the items always ended up having a purpose. Maybe the cryovision was meant to be given to someone else? But who would need a cryovision? Looking at the 3 new affection enhancement card Pro Max he had obtained, Luo Qing started to have a hunch. Did the system sense what I wanted to do with her, so it gave me these? Having reviewed all the new items, he turned his attention to the final golden one. Guardian Angel, a passive item. When the wearer loses all vital signs, the item is consumed to reconstruct the body, reviving the user in a weakened state. Note, the item has a cooldown period. After use, it requires a year to recharge before it can be used again. Can be used on others. Having this item meant he essentially had an extra life. Even if he were unexpectedly struck down, he could survive. With the current favorability Raiden Shogun and Ei held for him, he wasn't too concerned about either of them harming him. The main reason he wanted this item was to win over Rosalind from the Tsaritsa. Of the few people under his command, only Teresa had any real combat power. The other 3, Natalia and her companions, were mainly suited for administrative roles. If they encountered Lumen or any other well-armed forces, they'd struggle to defend themselves. The Fatui Harbingers were all talented. Recruiting just a few would greatly strengthen his own faction. Besides, Rosalind was destined to die someday, so why not make the most of it? She could still be a useful pawn. After all, when had a Harbinger ever hesitated to backstab a colleague? First, Rosalind, then Arlecchino, followed by Sandrone and Columbina. And maybe even Her Majesty, the Tsaritsa. Hiss. He-he. Luo Qing indulged in a little daydream, picturing himself surrounded by beautiful and capable subordinates. A slight smile formed on his lips. What are you smiling about? A curious voice came from across the room. Why was Luo Qing grinning to himself like that, even making some odd sounds? Oh, it's nothing. Luo Qing waved his hand. I just thought of something happy. What is it? I'm not telling you. Fine, don't tell me then. Ei huffed lightly and resumed reading her book. After a moment, the sound of Luo Qing tinkering with something reached her ears. She set the book down, frowning slightly. Looking up, she saw Luo Qing fiddling with some strange metallic object on the floor. What is that? A gateway to a new world. Luo Qing replied absent-mindedly, not bothering to look up as he adjusted the object, mumbling strange things to himself. How can a toilet not be used for well, you know? Ei was stunned. She recognized every word Luo Qing said, but together they made no sense. She set her book down and walked over to him, eyeing the strange, metallic object that gleamed with an odd sheen. What are you doing? Opening a gateway to a new world. Is that hard to understand? Ei's brow furrowed. Speak clearly. Well, with your brain, I think just wait a minute, and I'll show you. Luo Qing said casually. He then mentally accessed his inventory and retrieved the second interstellar toilet, setting it up across the room. After another series of adjustments, Luo Qing stood up and exhaled deeply. All right, it's done. He turned to Ei, smiling mischievously. Didn't you want to know what it does? Sit on it, and you'll see. Ei glanced at Luo Qing, her expression as if to say, do you think I'm a fool? Be good, trust me. Cough, fine, you don't have to sit on it. But why the sword? Put that thing away. As soon as Ei retracted the blade she had poised at his neck, Luo Qing plopped down on the toilet with a grin. Watch closely. Don't blink. With that, he pressed the flush button. The sound of rushing water filled the room, and Luo Qing felt a strange suction from below. In the next instant, the room blurred, and he found himself sitting on the second interstellar toilet. That was kind of fun. Recalling the odd sensation, he looked back at Yae. Wanna try? It's pretty cool. Then he pressed the button again, reappearing at his original spot. Yae was silent. From her perspective, the moment Luo Qing pressed the button, the strange object swallowed him, only to spit him out on the other side. Since she had established the plane of Euthymia, her sensitivity to spatial forces had sharpened. In that brief moment of travel, she had indeed sensed a spatial distortion. Could that so-called gateway to a new world really possess such power? Luo Qing went back and forth a few more times. Seeing Yae still standing there in a daze, he urged her again. Are you sure you don't want to try? It's really fun. Yae hesitated. She had to admit she was intrigued by the spatial energy within the toilet. But the way Luo Qing had sat on it earlier. Come on, it doesn't hurt at all. Give it a go. Luo Qing coaxed. Fine, I'll try it. A faint blush spread across Yae's cheeks as she adjusted her clothes, staring at the strange toilet. Steeling herself, she slowly sat down. Then, she pressed the flush button. Immediately, she felt an odd suction from below. Mm. In the next instant, she was on the other side. Luo Qing was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. Nice sound, Miss Yae. Cough, cough. Let's talk this out, put the sword away. Yae sheathed the blade she had raised again, her face slightly red from the strange sensation she'd just experienced. Where did you get this thing? That's a secret. Luo Qing replied with a smile. He stashed one of the toilets back into his inventory, then patted the remaining one and said. I'm leaving this gateway to a new world here. From now on, I'll use it to visit you. Yae frowned slightly. This is my domain. Who said you could leave your things here? With it, I can bring you more light novels and treats anytime I want. Yae was speechless. Chapter 111, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 111 200 PS. Bonus chapter. In the end, Yae gave in. She had to admit, the promise of having updated light novels and freshly baked desserts delivered anytime she wanted hit her weak spot. After tossing Luo Qing out of the plane of Euthymia, she stared at the remaining gateway to a new world, the strange toilet, and found herself deep in thought. She hesitated for a moment, shaking her head to ensure Luo Qing was gone, then sat back down on the mysterious toilet and pressed the flush button. Ding! Please deploy a second gateway, or the flush function cannot be activated. The unfamiliar electronic voice startled her, making her jump up from the toilet. Meanwhile, after being thrown out of the plane of Euthymia, Luo Qing managed to placate Raiden Shogun by promising he would visit her alone soon for a private moment together. She promptly chased him out of Tenshukaku with her blade in hand. Now that he had the guardian angel item, his next step was to find an excuse to give the resurrection armor to Rosalind and start planning how to get closer to her. Besides, he still had 3 more affection enhancement card Pro Max perfect for a little test run. As he left Tenshukaku, Luo Qing was thinking about relaxing for a few days while Lumen progressed through the Inajima storyline. He had just stepped into Hanamizaka when a pink-haired fox blocked his way. Well, Mr. Luo Qing. What a coincidence, out for a stroll. Yae Miko greeted him with a teasing smile, waving a paper fan, her eyes sparkling playfully. Before he could respond, Yae Miko tapped his lips with her fan, her fox ears twitching as she spoke softly. Mr. Luo Qing is a valued guest of Yae Publishing House. Since we've met by chance, why don't you allow me to treat you at Liyue restaurant? Luo Qing was momentarily speechless. I see through your little scheme, you sly fox. Does Miss Yae have something she needs my help with? Mr. Luo Qing is quite the joker. I just wanted to chat with you, that's all. Of course, she's as slippery as ever. Anyone else might have crumbled under Yae Miko's charm by now, but Luo Qing was a man of integrity. Her allure had no effect on him. As a man of Snezhnia, he felt it was his duty to uphold the proud spirit of a cunning merchant. So, he feigned reluctance. But I have plans later, Miss Yae. You see. But I really want to spend time with you. Well then. Luo Qing leaned in close, speaking quietly. Miss Yae, how about you pay me 50,000 mora, and I'll accompany you tonight. +1 frustration value from Yae Miko. Yae Miko nearly lost her composure. In Inajima, people who wish to spend time alone with me could line up from the city to the Grand Narukami Shrine. And here you are, demanding 50,000 mora from me. But curiosity gnawed at her, so she kept her calm and continued. Mr. Luo Qing, you really do know how to jest. 50,000 mora wouldn't get you much. How about this, I'll waive all your future expenses at Yae Publishing House. I suppose that's fair. Luo Qing pretended to think it over, then nodded slowly. Deal. Miss Yae, tonight I'm all yours. +1 frustration value from Yae Miko. Well then, Mr. Luo Qing, let's proceed to Liyue restaurant. For a moment, Yae Miko had a strange feeling. Liyue restaurant. As a regular, Yae Miko didn't even need to order. The moment she stepped in, the owner, Okazaki Rikut, knew what dishes to prepare, heading straight to the kitchen. They sat side by side at a table, and soon enough, an array of Liyue's finest dishes was set before them. Luo Qing, however, focused solely on eating, completely ignoring Yae Miko. Finally, she couldn't stand it any longer and asked. Mr. Luo Qing, has your friend been enjoying the recent light novels from Yae Publishing House? She loves them. 5 stars. I'll buy more next time. Luo Qing replied casually before continuing to devour his food. +1 frustration value from Yae Miko. I've heard that you've practically bought out all the female-oriented light novels at our store. As the chief editor of Yae Publishing House, I'd love to meet your friend. Would you give me the honor of an introduction? Yae Miko's suspicion had already led her to believe that this friend of Luo Qing was none other than Ei, hiding away in the plain of Euthymia. But without direct confirmation, she couldn't fathom why Ei, who had shut herself away from the world, would rely on this Fatui agent. It bothered her. After all, she was the one who had been friends with Ei for years, yet Ei wouldn't even see her face. Ah, that's not possible. She's a bit of a recluse and rarely goes out. Luo Qing shook his head and continued eating. Yae Miko pondered for a moment before suggesting. Then how about you take me to her home? But Luo Qing shook his head and said seriously. That would cost extra. Mr. Luo Qing wants mora. Not at all. Then what is it that you want? Yae Miko was genuinely curious. How about this? Luo Qing looked up, his gaze resting on Yae Miko's fluffy ears, and he asked playfully. Let me touch your ears. Don't worry, I'll be gentle. +10 frustration value from Yae Miko. Yae Miko finally understood. Luo Qing clearly knew what she was after. He was deliberately toying with her. How could Ei, who's always hiding obediently in the plain of Euthymia, even know someone like him? Doesn't she realize he might be deceiving her? Alright, Mr. Luo Qing, let's cut to the chase. After some thought, Yae Miko decided to be direct. If she kept beating around the bush, he'd just continue playing dumb. Oh? Miss Yae, going straight to the point. Seeing Yae Miko drop the pretense so quickly surprised Luo Qing. It seemed her defenses weren't all that high after all. Does she genuinely like those light novels? You guess. How did you meet her? Not telling. +10 frustration value from Yae Miko. Yae Miko swore that if she didn't have so many unanswered questions, she would have struck him down with a lightning bolt by now. Alright, I was just teasing you, Miss Yae. Luo Qing smiled and continued. If you really want to know, why don't you just go see her yourself? You can visit her anytime. Why not? Luo Qing leaned back in his chair. In the past, he would have needed Raiden Shogun's approval to enter. But now, with the toilet set up, he could come and go as he pleased. However, nothing is free in this world. Surely, Miss Yae understands that. Yae Miko frowned slightly. What do you want? Let me touch your ears. Or your tail, that works too. Translators note: hi, trainers. I'm so excited to finally bring you Team Rocket's second in command. After translating over 300 chapters of this absolute gem, I can tell you it's everything action, drama, and just the right amount of chaos. Luo Yuan isn't just a trainer, he's the trainer, slaying battles, running the underworld, and making us all swoon with his brilliance. This is the last story I'll be posting this month, so let's go out with a bang. Thank you so much for all your love and support. You've made this journey so much fun to share. Now, let's dive in and cheer for our boy as he takes the Pokemon world by storm. Chapter 112, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 112. Yae Miko's brow furrowed as she contemplated whether or not to resort to force against Luo Qing. His words were infuriating. How did Ei manage to tolerate him without striking him down? Mr. Luo Qing, do you understand the consequences of saying something like that? Her tone turned cold, and her eyes narrowed, as the pressure of a divine being enveloped Liyue restaurant. Even the owner and chefs dared not make a sound, fearing to provoke the high priestess. But despite the suffocating aura, Luo Qing seemed entirely unaffected. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Luo Qing downed his drink in one go, wiped his mouth, and then casually looked at Yae Miko, seemingly oblivious to her intimidation. So, Miss Yae, you're not willing to meet my conditions. Just a little more, Yae Miko thought. She was on the verge of blasting Luo Qing with a fox thunderbolt. If they weren't in Liyue restaurant, and if she wasn't worried about collateral damage, he would have gotten a good smack already. Humph, what do you think? Yae Miko scoffed. You want to touch my ears and tail in front of everyone here? If I agree, what kind of high priestess would I be? If you don't agree, then forget it. Luo Qing shrugged, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Whenever you've made up your mind, Miss Yae, I'll be waiting. He got up, ready to leave. But after only a few steps, he turned around and sat back down next to Yae Miko. Oh? Why are you back, Mr. Luo Qing? Did you? Yae Miko's voice was teasing, assuming that Luo Qing was reconsidering to negotiate terms. But before she could finish, Luo Qing interrupted her seriously. I have professional standards. I said I'd spend the evening with you, Miss Yae, so I'm going to keep my word. Plus 10 frustration value from Yae Miko. This guy is dead set on touching my foxtail, isn't he? For hundreds of years, Yae Miko had always been the one to trick others, not the other way around. But now, Luo Qing held a secret she desperately wanted to know, and she couldn't afford to truly fall out with him. It had been ages since she'd felt this kind of frustration after the person in question had left. Maybe I should just let him touch it. No. That's my ears and tail. How could I even think of something so ridiculous? Caught in her emotional turmoil, Yae Miko found herself momentarily stunned. Could it be that, deep down, I actually want to be? No way. So, where does Miss Yae want to go next? Luo Qing asked casually, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside Yae Miko's mind. He had nothing else planned for the upcoming days, so spending time with the sly fox seemed like a good way to pass the time. It's getting late, and I have other matters to attend to. Why don't we continue this another day? Luo Qing shook his head. No can do. Private appointments come with an extra fee. Goodbye. Without another word, Yae Miko left Liyue restaurant without looking back. Foxes are known for holding grudges. Whatever ground she lost today, Yae Miko vowed to regain in the future. But right now, she had to prepare for her meeting with the traveler. She didn't have the time or patience to continue tangling with Luo Qing. Once everything was settled, she'd find a way to toy with him properly. After parting ways with Yae Miko on a sour note and with Kamisato Ayaka back at the Yashiro Commission, Luo Qing found himself with nothing to do and returned to his resting place. Without the constant need to focus on gathering frustration points, his days had become much more leisurely. Upon entering his room, he found Rosalind still lounging inside, lazily flipping through a light novel. When she noticed Luo Qing's return, she raised an eyebrow but pretended not to see him, burying her face back in her book. Hey, Rosalind, have you seriously been reading light novels this whole time since I left? Mind your own business. Go away and stop bothering me. Rosalind's tone was cold. Luo Qing was momentarily speechless. Is this icy and aloof Rosalind secretly a homebody too? Talk about breaking character. What are you reading? Let me see. Luo Qing sat across from Rosalind and casually picked up a book from her pile. The Wandering Maiden's Youthful Journey, A Girl's Dream of a Noble Knight. What an odd choice. Didn't you say these were all garbage books? Why are you reading them all day? Luo Qing flipped through a few pages and asked offhandedly. You're so annoying. Rosalind's brow furrowed. Whenever Luo Qing was around, her mood seemed to plummet. One day, I'm going to get rid of him. This is my room. Didn't the logistics division assign you a room? Why are you still hanging out here? Rosalind snorted. Humph, it's mine now. You want to share a bed that badly? Rosalind's frown deepened. Was Luo Qing really this dense, or was he doing this on purpose? He was even bold enough to tease his superior. My patience has limits, Luo Qing. Just because we're colleagues doesn't mean I won't take action against you. Oh? And what kind of action are you planning? Kneeling or sitting? +1 frustration value from Rosalind. Alright, alright. You keep reading, I won't bother you anymore. Luo Qing waved dismissively, pulled over a tatami mat, and lay down, covering his face with a book, intending to take a nap. After all, it was his room, he wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, Rosalind kept sneaking glances at Luo Qing every few seconds, suspecting he was up to something. But as the minutes passed, Luo Qing didn't move at all, leaving her increasingly puzzled. Is he really asleep? I'm still sitting right here, and he's not even a little on guard. Is he not worried that I might do something to him? After some thought, Rosalind flicked her fingers, conjuring a small mist of frost that floated toward Luo Qing. Before the frost could touch him, a muffled voice came from under the book. Don't mess around. I'm trying to sleep. Don't mess around? Is he treating me like a child? Rosalind felt a flash of irritation, but, eager to continue reading and catch up on the latest chapters, she decided to let it slide, burying her nose back in her book. Time ticked away, and midnight came. Stretching, Rosalind finished her light novel and glanced over at Luo Qing, who was still in the exact same position as before, not having moved an inch. This guy, isn't he supposed to be from the intelligence division? Or does he really trust me that much? Rosalina's thoughts were tangled. Among the Fatui Harbingers, deception and scheming were common. Even though they all served the Tsaritsa, each had their own hidden agendas, often ready to stab each other in the back. Except for Child, most Harbingers interacted with countless ulterior motives. How is Luo Qing so unguarded, just falling asleep right in front of me? Chapter 113, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 113. A few days passed. With no immediate need for more frustration points, Luo Qing had returned to his leisurely routine, fishing every day, and occasionally using the toilet portal to visit the plane of Euthymia, where he'd deliver updated light novels and freshly baked desserts to EI. To his surprise, Rosalind seemed to be a secret homebody. Usually busy with her duties of collecting gnosis, she rarely had any free time. But Luo Qing's time restriction had forced her to delay her plans, giving her a whole month of unexpected downtime. With no tasks to occupy her, she had stayed at Luo Qing's safe house, turning into a version of the homebody Raiden Shogun, spending her days enjoying tea and reading light novels, letting time pass by without concern. Luo Qing had once subtly asked if she had any other ambitions aside from serving the Tsaritsa, but her response had been blunt. If not for serving Her Majesty, I'd have no reason to live. So don't ask such foolish questions. This only made Luo Qing label Rosalind with new tags, potential Yandere and Tsundere. One day, Luo Qing calculated that EI's supply of light novels and desserts must be running low. As her regular delivery person, he figured it was about time for the next round of provisions. So, he decided to visit Yae Publishing House to check if there were any new female-oriented light novels to bring to EI. Thinking about his deliveries always annoyed him slightly. Even if he were feeding a kitten or a puppy, they'd let him pet them after a while. But despite the massive bags of light novels and sweets he brought to EI, she'd always chase him around the plane of Euthymia with her blade if he so much as patted her head. Who's ever heard of a cat being this fierce? As Luo Qing reached the entrance of Yae Publishing House, he suddenly heard a soft yet firm voice. Luo Qing, stop right there. He turned to see Lumen and Paimon standing not far away, hands on their hips. Well, what a coincidence, you two. Luo Qing smiled lightly, waiting for them to walk up to him. Finally caught you, Luo Qing. Didn't you say you were heading back to Snezhnia? Paimon scolded, stomping her tiny feet. We're just employees, after all. Luo Qing spread his hands, feigning helplessness. Employees have to do what the boss tells them. If the boss tells me to come to Inajima, do you think I have a choice? Paimon was at a loss. He has a point. Lumen nodded in agreement. Yeah, I can't argue with that. So, what do you two want with me? Luo Qing crossed his arms. I'm a very busy man. Well. Lumen took off her backpack, rummaged through it for a moment, and pulled out a delicate little box, handing it to Luo Qing. Here. This is from Gomu. She asked me to deliver it to you. Yet. We thought we'd have to wait until we went to Snezhnia to give it to you, but you snuck off to Inajima. Paimon added, still pouting. Gomu gave me this. Luo Qing was puzzled as he took the box. Opening it, he found a bracelet woven with delicate sky blue and crimson threads. The blue thread is from Gomu, and the red one is from Shenhe. Lumen explained calmly, Gomu wanted me to tell you that she's sorry for what happened before. If you ever return to Liyue, she'll make it up to you for her past mistakes. And Shenhe. Paimon chimed in enthusiastically, she said that once her worldly training is complete, she'll come to Snezhnaya to find you. The sheer amount of information left Luo Qing stunned. Paimon, however, kept pressing. Luo Qing, tell us the truth. When did you start two-timing? Hey! Luo Qing was baffled, then gave Paimon a serious look. Paimon, you can't just say things like that. Careful, I might sue you for slander. +1 frustration value from Paimon. Then why did Gomu look like she was about to cry when she mentioned you to us? And Shenhe said if she doesn't find you, she'll stay in Snezhnaya and never return. You scumbag! Luo Qing looked down at the crimson bracelet in his hand, momentarily at a loss for words. Then, recalling Lumen's explanation about the bracelet, he realized something was off. He looked up at Lumen. You said they made this bracelet together. Yes. Is there a problem? Hiss-ha. Luo Qing leaned back, rubbing his temples. Did I just somehow end up with both the senior and junior disciple? I didn't even do anything. All I did was save them and hold them around the waist. Did they say anything else? Luo Qing asked cautiously. Paimon thought for a moment. Oh yeah. They wanted us to make sure you wear it at all times. They said it's been blessed by an adeptus to keep you safe. Okay. Luo Qing was taken aback. After some thought, he tied the bracelet around his left wrist. Immediately, a cool sensation spread from his wrist, accompanied by a faint, familiar scent. Isn't this Gomu and Shenhe's scent? Did they mention what this bracelet is made of? Luo Qing inquired. Well, Shenhe mentioned it was made from a piece of the red string she always wears. As for Gomu, she blushed when we asked her and didn't tell us. The sky blue silk-like texture, and she blushed. Hiss. Luo Qing felt like he'd pieced together the answer. Anyway, thank you both for bringing this to me. Luo Qing smiled, showing them the bracelet tied around his wrist. How about I treat you to some desserts? Really? Paimon's eyes sparkled, seemingly forgetting her earlier accusations of Luo Qing being a scumbag. Let's go. I know a small stand nearby that makes great dango with 3 colors. You might find it useful in the future. Yay! Desserts. Paimon danced in excitement. Since there was no rush to visit Ei, Luo Qing led them toward the dango stand. As they walked, a troubling thought crossed Luo Qing's mind, and he asked tentatively. Does anyone else know about this bracelet? No, why? Lumen replied. Nothing, just checking. Chapter 114, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 114. After treating Lumen and Paimon to a plate of 3-colored dango, Luo Qing managed to extract a bit more information from them through casual conversation. He learned that they had already met Kamisato Ayaka once and were now on their way back to Komor Tea House to meet her again after completing 3 small requests. This also meant that Lumen's first encounter with the Raiden Shogun was fast approaching. As someone who knew the story, Luo Qing wasn't particularly interested in the upcoming events. He was far more focused on figuring out when he could persuade Rosalind to leave the Tsaritsa and join his side. At most, he might intervene if Lumen found herself in a life-threatening situation. After parting ways with Lumen and Paimon, Luo Qing, as usual, bought a large bag of desserts and headed back to Yae Publishing House to pick up some newly released light novels. Then, he returned to the safe house. He pulled out the interstellar toilet from his system inventory, adjusted it a bit, and then sat down. With the sound of a satisfying flush, he was instantly transported to the plane of Euthymia. In the center of the realm, Ei floated cross-legged in midair, holding a light novel. She glanced up at Luo Qing and said coolly. Why are you so late today? I ran into a couple of acquaintances and chatted with them for a while. Luo Qing, now well practiced, set down his bags and then moved to tidy up the mess of empty dessert boxes and wrappers scattered around. Honestly, you can't just wait for me to clean up every time. You should at least do it yourself occasionally. Luo Qing sighed. For almost a week, he would come to the plane of Euthymia to deliver treats and clean up Ei's space, organizing the scattered light novels and throwing out leftover trash. He was beginning to feel more like Ei's personal housekeeper. Not that it was entirely a bad thing, every visit would earn him a slight increase in Ei's affection level. It was now up to 35 points. I never asked you to clean up. You're the one who insists on doing it. Ei ignored Luo Qing, pulling the dessert bags closer and rummaging through them. Her face lit up slightly when she found the familiar dango milk. You're unbelievable. Luo Qing shook his head and glanced around. Thanks to his repeated visits, the plain of Euthymia now looked vastly different from the first time he had seen it. 2 bookshelves stood behind Ei, filled with light novels she had already finished. In one corner of the shelves, a pile of empty dessert wrappers lay stacked. Thanks to the peculiar nature of the plain of Euthymia, the desserts Luo Qing brought here never seemed to spoil. If he added a single bed and a computer desk, this place might truly become the ultimate haven for a shut-in. This girl, am I really fattening? No, I mean, ruining her? He suddenly thought of Lumen, who he had seen earlier, and wondered if her brain would short-circuit if she saw this scene. By the way, Luo Qing sat down in front of Ei, trying to probe her thoughts. If I remember correctly, you approved the Vision Hunt decree because you saw visions as a variable, a hindrance to eternity, right? Yes, that's right. Why? Ei replied indifferently, eyes never leaving her light novel as she sipped on her dango milk. Don't talk with your mouth full. Ei's gaze darkened slightly, and she swallowed the dango. What, are you trying to object? No, just curious. Luo Qing shook his head. If visions are a variable because they allow people to control elemental powers, and thus hinder eternity, doesn't my breath style do the same thing? So why did you have me teach it to them? Only the unexpected counts as a variable. Swordsmanship has been passed down for generations. It is a form of eternity, and not a threat to it. What if, one day, someone is able to use elemental powers without a vision? Luo Qing leaned forward. If someone can wield the elements without a vision, they would naturally be a variable. What would you do then? That's the Shogun's responsibility, not mine. Ei continued reading. After a moment, she added. But if the Shogun can't handle it, I'll take care of it myself and eliminate the threat. Damn, that's harsh. Luo Qing was taken aback. He had thought that his constant deliveries might soften Ei's resolve. But she remained as ruthless as ever, ready to draw her sword at the slightest provocation. Why did you suddenly bring this up? Oh, nothing. Just messing with you. After leaving the plain of Euthymia, Luo Qing casually disposed of the trash. He glanced at Rosalina's room. A sliver of light was visible through the door crack, indicating she hadn't left all day. With nothing else to do, Luo Qing decided to go fishing, so he called out down the hallway, Teresa. Get ready, we're going fishing. Before Teresa could answer, Rosalina's door swung open. Longlegs stepped out, her face wearing a haughty expression tinged with annoyance. Can you keep your voice down? Hey! Lower your voice. You're bothering me. Humph. With that, Rosalind slammed the door shut. Luo Qing was left bewildered. Why does she also have the vibe of a shut-in? Has she been ruined, too? A moment later, Teresa came clacking down the hallway in wooden sandals, carrying a fishing rod, her purple eyes filled with eager anticipation. All right, my lord, let's go. Luo Qing took one last look at Rosalina's door before heading out with Teresa. As they passed by Komor Tea House, he made brief eye contact with the hostess, Kano Nana, who quickly looked away. Luo Qing watched her for a moment before awkwardly nodding a greeting. Just as they were about to leave, a burst of cheerful laughter drifted out from inside the tea house. Although muffled by the wooden walls, Luo Qing's heightened hearing could make out every word clearly. It was Kamisato Ayaka and Lumen playing a hot pot game inside. Judging from the sounds, it seemed that Paimon had eaten a beetle that Ayaka had slipped into the pot. Tisk, they seemed to be having a good time. Luo Qing couldn't help but sigh. If Ayaka's older brother hadn't come to disrupt things, he might have been in there enjoying the hot pot with them. Ever since the end of training, Ayaka had been preoccupied with the fate of her clan and her new friendship with Lumen, leaving no time for their meetings. Come to think of it, what Kamisato Ayato had said to Ayaka wasn't wrong. Getting too close to Luo Qing could easily lead to accusations of colluding with the Fatui. If the Tenryu and Kenjo commissions were ever purged of Fatui influence, the Yashiro commission wouldn't be able to escape scrutiny either. It was similar to how Ganyu had treated him in Liyue. Ayaka had made the sensible decision. Luo Qing was long used to this. Shortly after Luo Qing left, inside Komor tea house. The group, satisfied after their meal, sat around the hot pot table with contented smiles. Paimon patted her belly and turned to Toma. By the way, Toma, how do you know Luo Qing? Hearing this, Ayaka's expression shifted to surprise, and she spoke up before Toma could answer. Hey! You two know my master, I mean, Mr. Luo Qing, too. Of course. We met him back in Liyue. Paimon puffed out her chest. We know all about what he did there. Is that so? Ayaka's gaze softened as she recalled Luo Qing's previous warnings. She asked gently. Could you tell me more about what Mr. Luo Qing was like in Liyue? Sure thing. Paimon agreed enthusiastically. Some time later. Fishing on the coast, Luo Qing suddenly received a system notification. +1 frustration value from Kamisato Ayaka +1+1+1+1. Chapter 115, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable 115. A few more days went by. Ever since that night of playing the hot pot game, Luo Qing had intermittently received notifications from his system late at night. +1 frustration value from Kamisato Ayaka. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what had happened. Even when he visited Komor tea house to look for Ayaka, the hostess, Kano Nana, only told him that the lady had returned to the Yashiro Commission and asked him to come back another time. This left him even more puzzled. But if she didn't want to see him, he had no reason to push. One day, after finishing a fishing trip, Luo Qing passed by Rosaline's room and noticed the lights were off. Normally, she spent all her time in there, barely leaving the room even to eat. Why was she missing now? Feeling a bit suspicious, he called Teresa over from the hallway. Where's Rosaline? Ah, the shogunate is holding some kind of public vision hunt ceremony, and Lady Rosaline said she was interested in seeing it. She also asked me to tell you not to worry, she won't be meeting the Raiden Shogun until the right time. Ah, I see. Hearing the words public vision hunt, Luo Qing instantly understood. Lately, he'd been using the interstellar toilet to visit EI, so it had been a while since he'd interacted with the Raiden Shogun. He didn't even know that his good buddy Toma had been captured. Without further delay, Luo Qing hurried toward the statue of the omnipresent god. Just as he passed through Hanamizaka, he saw a crowd gathered around the statue, with Toma tied up in the center, kneeling as if awaiting judgment. Glancing up at the raised platform, Luo Qing saw the Raiden Shogun looking down coldly at Toma. Sensing Luo Qing's gaze, the Raiden Shogun glanced his way, letting out a barely audible huff. What is he doing here? Is he planning to disrupt the ceremony? If he actually dares, should I cut him down on the spot? The Raiden Shogun hesitated, torn. Moments later, the ceremony began, signaled by the priest's drumbeats as the 100th vision hunt commenced. The Raiden Shogun cast another glance at Luo Qing. After a brief moment of thought, she made up her mind and raised her right hand. A deep violet light appeared at Toma's waist, yanking his vision from him. It floated slowly toward the Raiden Shogun's waiting hand. Suddenly, a flurry of footsteps broke the tense silence. Luo Qing turned to see Lumen sprinting forward. With a leap, she charged through the crowd, electricity sparking around her, and snatched the vision back mid-air, returning it to Toma. Go, now! Lumen shouted to Toma, standing firmly between him and the Raiden Shogun, her blade at the ready. At the same moment, the Raiden Shogun's gaze shifted to Luo Qing. Linked to EI's consciousness, she was aware of everything that happened within the plane of Euthymia, including Luo Qing's earlier questions about those who could wield the elements without a vision. So he's curious about that, well, let's show him. With a cold snort, she slowly lifted her long, pale leg, crackling with lightning, and stepped toward Lumen. As long as Luo Qing didn't interfere, she had no qualms about dealing with anyone else. You, without needing a vision, you can command the elements. You are an anomaly. Suddenly, a surge of lightning crackled around the Raiden Shogun, and she extended her right hand to her chest. The lightning intensified. From the depths of her chest, a blade's hilt began to form, radiating with violet light. In front of the shocked crowd, she drew the Muzu no Hitotachi from within her chest. Pulling out a sword from her chest. That's a little suggestive. If she can fit a sword there, doesn't that mean she could fit other things too? Ahem, focus, focus. Snapping himself back to reality, Luo Qing saw the space around the Raiden Shogun shatter. A void-like darkness expanded rapidly, enveloping Lumen and vanishing from sight. Paimon, now separated from Lumen, was frantic, flying in circles and unable to find her friend. Spotting Luo Qing, she darted toward him, crying out with a hint of desperation. Luo Qing! Please, save Lumen. She's gone. Paimon knew the Fatui Harbingers were fearsomely powerful. With Toma currently helpless, her only hope was in the unlikely ally, Luo Qing. But her cry caught the attention of the crowd, who now turned their eyes to Luo Qing. Another accomplice. The onlookers hastily stepped away from Luo Qing, creating a wide circle around him in mere seconds, afraid of being associated with a potential criminal. What they? Classic Paimon. Luo Qing looked down at the teary-eyed, desperate Paimon in front of him. I'm just here to watch the show, and you're dragging all the attention onto me? He glanced up at the Raiden Shogun. Her aloof expression seemed to say, if you dare to help, I'll cut you down too. If I help, Lumen will be back soon anyway, and it won't even matter. If I don't help, it would feel pretty heartless, especially since we're supposed to be friends. Alright, Paimon, stop crying. Be but Lumen. Don't worry, she'll be fine. Luo Qing patted Paimon's head gently before stepping away from the crowd, though there weren't really many people left around him. He glanced at Toma, who was still kneeling on the ground, and took a deep breath before facing the Raiden Shogun. Let me go in and take a look. Humph, and why should I? The Raiden Shogun's scoff was laced with cold disdain. Can't you get in yourself? Ever since Luo Qing had gained free access to the plane of Euthymia, he hadn't sought her out even once. Now he wanted help without saying a word of explanation? She wouldn't waste her time. You. Luo Qing sighed, pointing a finger at the Raiden Shogun. With a mental command, he pulled the interstellar toilet out of his system inventory. Then, right there in front of everyone, he sat down and pressed the flush button. Chapter 116, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 116. In the plane of Euthymia. Surrounded by darkness, Lumen anxiously scanned her surroundings. Scarlet torii gates sprung up from the ground, enclosing her. A crimson moon hung high in the sky, casting a deep red hue over the land. Suddenly, feeling an overwhelmingly powerful presence behind her, Lumen spun around. Under the blood-red moon, a figure floated mid-air. She looked identical to the Raiden Shogun, yet the aura she exuded was far more dangerous. Behind her, two large bookshelves stood to the left and right, filled with an assortment of light novels. In the corners of the shelves lay discarded dessert boxes, incongruously littered amidst the oppressive atmosphere. Is this? Lumen muttered to herself, looking up at Ei, who was engrossed in a light novel, only deepening Lumen's confusion. Hearing Lumen's voice, Ei furrowed her brow, slowly closed the book, and placed it back on the shelf. A wielder of elemental power without a vision, just as he said. So, you have appeared. Lumen was bewildered. Feeling the intense killing intent from Ei, Lumen gripped her dull blade tightly and attempted to summon elemental power, only to find it impossible. None of the elements responded to her call. I can't use elemental power. How can this be? As a disruptive force, you belong sealed within the statue. With those words, Ei's Musuishin materialized in her hand, and in a flash, she lunged at Lumen. Caught off guard, Lumen raised her dull blade in front of her, barely blocking Ei's strike. Yet the sheer force of the blow sent her tumbling to the ground. There was a vast chasm in power between a weakened Lumen and the god of thunder. Ei, unhurried, held her blade steady and walked slowly toward the fallen Lumen. Though she might seem like a shut-in otaku when Luo Qing was around, that was only because of their high mutual fondness level. But with Lumen, whose fondness level was currently at 0, Ei had no qualms. She considered Lumen an anomaly that had to be eliminated, showing no mercy. Enduring the pain in her arm, Lumen forced herself up once more, gripping her sword tightly. Humph! Ei scoffed, her figure flickering like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, she was beside Lumen, flicking her dull blade away with a casual swipe, sending Lumen sprawling to the ground. One high, one low locked in a tense stare, Lumen felt a sense of helplessness for the first time as she looked into Ei's glowing eyes. A thought crossed her mind. Am I going to die here? But I haven't found my brother yet. In front of her, Ei raised her blade, poised to deliver a fatal strike. As if rooted to the spot, Lumen found she couldn't move, watching helplessly as the blade descended. Just as she expected to be sliced down, a spear suddenly thrust between them, intercepting the blow. Really? You were seriously going to cut her down? A familiar voice spoke up. Lumen turned her head to see Luo Qing holding a spear, blocking Yi's purple blade. Luo Qing, why are you? Lumen's eyes widened. She couldn't comprehend why he was here. So the he that the Raiden Shogun mentioned earlier, was Luo Qing. Your Paimon begged me to come. So, you owe me a huge favor now. Luo Qing replied casually, inwardly relieved that he had chosen to enter the plane of Euthymia to check on the situation. If he'd been even a moment later, Lumen might have been cut down, and by tomorrow, the Abyss Order would probably be wreaking havoc across the surface. Hey, you! Luo Qing turned to Yi, frowning. You knew I was testing you that day, so did you really have to cut her down? Move! Yi's brows furrowed, surprised that Luo Qing had chased her all the way to the plane of Euthymia for this blonde-haired traveler. Yi wasn't in the mood for idle chatter with Luo Qing. After all, today, she had firmly decided to take Lumen down. How about sparing her as a favor to me? Yi. Lumen. Move. Not moving. If you want, you can cut me down too. Luo Qing stood in front of Lumen, arms crossed defiantly. Are you really not going to move? Not moving. Go ahead, cut me down if you dare. Lumen watched the two, feeling an odd sense of dissonance. It was as if they weren't discussing a matter of life and death, but merely squabbling over something trivial. Humph, don't think I won't. Yi was at her limit, unused to such brazen defiance. Tightening her grip on Muzu Ishin, she swung the blade at Luo Qing. In the next moment, the blade struck empty air, leaving a deep cut in the ground. Holy! Luo Qing ducked the blow, eyeing the gash on the floor. He swallowed nervously and turned to Yi. Ai, you're serious? I told you not to call me Ai. With that, Yi's blade flashed again, slashing toward Luo Qing. Since Lumen couldn't escape the plane of Euthymia without her permission, Yi decided to deal with Luo Qing first. In an instant, Luo Qing and Yi began flickering through the plane of Euthymia, their movements so swift that Lumen could only see blurry afterimages. Oddly, they both seemed to deliberately avoid the central bookshelves, as if unwilling to damage them. Lumen stood up, picking up her dull blade, watching the figure locked in combat with the God of Thunder. She didn't know why Luo Qing was helping her, but she couldn't just remain a passive bystander. Luo Qing, let me help you. Lumen called out, preparing to join the fray, but was cut off by Luo Qing's shout from amidst the shadows. Help! Stay out of this! Lumen was at a loss. If she didn't help him, what else was she supposed to do? See that toilet over there? Luo Qing's voice echoed again from the blurring figures. Sit on it, press the button, and get out of here. Hey! Lumen was momentarily stunned. Sure enough, not far from the bookshelves was a strange object, which seemed to match Luo Qing's description of a toilet. What are you standing there for? Go, I can't hold her off much longer. Luo Qing's voice carried a hint of urgency. Barely managing to fend off Yi using time zero and his long spear, he knew he couldn't keep up for long. Hearing his words, Lumen finally understood that Luo Qing was buying time for her. She hurried to the strange-looking toilet, sat down, and after some fumbling, found the flush button. Pressing it, she felt a bizarre pulling sensation from beneath her. Huma! In the next moment, Lumen's figure vanished from the plane of Euthymia. As her vision brightened, she found herself back in front of the Vision Hunt ceremony platform. But this time, she was sitting in the middle of the platform on the toilet, with everyone in the crowd staring at her and murmuring in hushed voices. Chapter 117, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 117. Meanwhile, in the plain of Euthymia, under the crimson moon, the clash of spear and sword echoed. Even though Lumen had already left, the battle between Luo Qing and Yi showed no signs of stopping. Yi's power continued to mirror Luo Qing's, as if she were toying with him, venting her frustrations. Hey, she's already gone. Why are you still fighting me? Humph. I swear, after bringing you all those light novels and desserts, you're still going to cut me down like this. Hat. I'm telling you, if you keep this up, I won't bring you any more novels or treats. At these words, Yi's strikes genuinely slowed for a moment. Seizing the opportunity under the deceleration of time zero, Luo Qing quickly sat down on the toilet, pressing the flush button, escaping from the plane of Euthymia. He knew this shut-in would never leave her sanctuary. While the Raiden Shogun was a bit aloof, she was far easier to deal with compared to Ei, who had lived for centuries. Returning to the Vision Hunt platform, Lumen had just gotten off the toilet when Luo Qing's head popped out of it. If she had lingered a moment longer, his face would have sent her flying off. With two people emerging from such a bizarre object, the crowd around them was already buzzing with murmurs. What was initially expected to be a simple Vision Hunt ceremony had turned into quite a spectacle, and everyone was wondering how the Raiden Shogun would deal with these intruders. Luo Qing glanced at the Raiden Shogun, who stood imposingly on the platform. With a flick of his finger, a thin pillar of rock rose beside Toma, slicing the ropes binding his wrists. "You two go. I'll handle things here." Luo Qing but Lumen hesitated, seemingly reluctant to leave him behind. "Don't worry about me," Luo Qing said with a reassuring smile, keeping a wary eye on the Raiden Shogun to prevent her from making any sudden moves. Seeing his confidence, Lumen finally steeled herself. Sharing a glance with Toma, they broke through the encircling soldiers and fled. The Raiden Shogun watched them go, her brow furrowed slightly as she turned her gaze back to Luo Qing. If she chose to strike, Luo Qing would certainly block her. But somehow, she just couldn't bring herself to deliver a fatal blow. Considering everything that had happened in the plain of Euthymia, she decided to let the traveler go this time. Next time, however, she would seal her within the statue, no exceptions. "Take him to the Tenshukaku," the Raiden Shogun commanded coldly, before vanishing from the scene in a flash of lightning. Elsewhere, Luo Qing knew he had interrupted the Raiden Shogun's ceremony, so he figured he might as well cooperate and give her some face. He didn't resist as the soldiers bound him tightly and escorted him to the Tenshukaku. Before long, he was at the Tenshukaku. It was the same familiar room, with the same familiar person. Luo Qing had been here so many times that he was quite at home. The only difference this time was that he was bound like a prisoner, kneeling before the Raiden Shogun. It was almost like he was a rebellious servant facing his stern mistress. "Why did you save her?" The Raiden Shogun stood before him, hand gripping her sword, as if ready to decapitate him should he lie. Of course, this was all for show. She would never actually strike. In this world, loyalty and friendship are everything. "She's my friend, isn't that reason enough?" Luo Qing declared passionately. The Raiden Shogun's expression turned flat, her gaze seemingly saying, "Do you think I'm buying any of that? You knew she was coming to Inajima, didn't you? Wow, you're smart. Should I reward you with a little pat?" Raiden Shogun's frustration value +1. The Raiden Shogun's eyes narrowed as she spoke icily. "Do you really think I wouldn't kill you? Of course, I know you'd never bring yourself to do it." Luo Qing gave a soft chuckle, even leaning his neck forward as if to dare her. "Go ahead, if you have the guts, do it." The Raiden Shogun remained silent for a long while before two words slipped from her lips. "Shameless scoundrel." She sat down across from Luo Qing, continuing in a calmer tone. "I've already issued a warrant for their capture. How long do you think they can run? They just need to survive. I don't care where they go. Now, can I get up? My legs are falling asleep." "No." "Alright, can I at least get a drink?" "No." "Then what's the point of dragging me here? Miss me that much?" The Raiden Shogun's expression darkened. How could someone like Luo Qing, with such thick skin, exist in this world? He was a prisoner. How did he lack any sense of self-awareness? Did he think he was here as a guest? Meanwhile, at the Komor tea house. After dodging the pursuit of the shogunate soldiers, Lumen and the others slipped into the Komor tea house. As a domain exclusively for the Yashiro Commission, the tea house was off-limits to outsiders without permission except for the shogun herself. No one else could enter freely. Thus, even with the shogunate soldiers scouring Inajima City, as long as they remained inside the Komor tea house, they were safe for the time being. As the Yashiro Commission's housekeeper, Toma could stay indefinitely, but Lumen and Paimon clearly couldn't. At Toma's suggestion, they decided to head for Tatarasuna before the bounty was fully announced, hoping to find refuge with the resistance forces. After seeing Lumen and Paimon off, Toma returned to a private room inside the tea house. Seeing him enter, Ayato quickly rushed forward, her face full of concern. "Toma! Are you all right? Thank goodness you still have your vision." Realizing he was alone, her worry deepened. "Where are Lumen and Paimon? Did something happen to them?" "Don't worry, my lady. They're safe." Toma shook his head. The Shogun's bounty will be issued any moment now, so I told them to head for Tatarasuna and meet with the resistance. The resistance? Ayaka murmured, lowering her gaze in thought. Beyond the Yashiro Commission, the only group openly opposing the Vision Hunt decree was the resistance on Watatsumi Island. Sending Lumen to them was indeed a last resort. How did you manage to escape? Ayaka asked. Well. Tama's expression grew complicated as he recalled the earlier events. He had always suspected Luo Qing, fearing that his presence would endanger the Kamisato clan and the Yashiro Commission. Yet in the end, it was Luo Qing who had sacrificed himself to save him. It was Luo Qing he saved us from the Shogun. Luo Qing. Ayaka's eyes widened in surprise. Ever since she'd learned of those two women in Liyue from Lumen, she had been wrestling with the decision to cut ties with Luo Qing. They hadn't seen each other in so long, and she had almost made up her mind. But now, once again, his name surfaced at a critical moment. Was it really impossible to escape him? Chapter 118, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 118. Several days later, at the Tenshukaku. Since that night when Luo Qing interrupted the Vision Hunt ceremony, he had been confined within the Tenshukaku. To say confined might be an exaggeration, it was more like he was living alongside the Raiden Shogun, staying indoors as a homebody. With his high approval rating, if it had been anyone else, they would have been cut down by the Shogun long ago. But since it was Luo Qing, she couldn't bring herself to draw her blade. And putting him in the dungeons? With his strength, he'd escape in a matter of moments. So, with no better option, she kept him close, acting as his personal warden. She locked him in the Tenshukaku, maintaining the shogunate's dignity in the process. Days passed, and at first, Luo Qing had expected some form of punishment. But as time went on, he realized the shogun's idea of confinement was just keeping him in her room and preventing him from going to the plane of Euthymia to see Ei. As long as he didn't try to escape, she didn't care what he did. Compared to Ei, who had her various shut-in tendencies, the Raiden Shogun was more rigid. Aside from meditating or attending to the many administrative affairs of Inajima, she didn't have any hobbies. She was like a robot, indifferent to all of Luo Qing's attempts at teasing. Unlike Ei, she didn't blush, didn't react when he tried to mess with her. She remained aloof, reducing the thrill of his antics. Luckily, Luo Qing was still able to request light novels from the servants, keeping his boredom at bay. That evening, Luo Qing was, as usual, reclining lazily on the Raiden Shogun's private dais, a light novel in one hand and his head resting on the other, trying to kill time. In front of him, the Raiden Shogun sat at her desk, reviewing reports from the front lines in Tatarasuna. The traveler had been spotted in the rebel army's ranks, causing trouble for the shogunate forces. But Luo Qing didn't care about any of that. He was just biding his time, waiting for a chance to lure Rosalind into becoming his tool. The rest? He was merely a spectator. One was reading war reports, the other reading a light novel. With the quiet night and the glow of candlelight, there was an unexpected sense of harmony between them. Suddenly, a breeze passed through, and Luo Qing noticed something was off. The air seemed to carry more electro-energy than usual. Before he could ponder further, a thunder manifestation flew in from the balcony, landing on his book and blinking its large eyes at him. Luo Qing recognized the markings. This wasn't just any manifestation, it was a special breed nurtured by Teresa, far more intelligent and powerful than the average one. Teresa rarely summoned it, and it was a rare sight even in battle. Why had it flown here? A bad feeling crept over Luo Qing. Just as he was about to rise, a firework exploded in the distance. In the midst of the colorful burst, the sound of a gunshot pierced the air, a bullet hurtling towards the back of the Raiden Shogun's head. In an instant, violet lightning flickered, shattering the bullet into fragments before it could touch her. At that moment, more of Teresa's thunder manifestations flew in, filling the room. All of them were the specialized types she had bred. Then, a figure in violet landed before Luo Qing, shielding him. Luo Qing-sama, we've come to rescue you. Frustration value +1 from Luo Qing. Luo Qing stared at Teresa standing protectively in front of him, feeling a mix of emotions. Before he could explain, more gunshots rang out from the distance, but, like before, the bullets were torn apart by the Shogun's lightning before they could come near. Humph! The Raiden Shogun finally understood what was happening. With a cold snort, she stood and looked directly at Teresa, who had barged into the Tenshukaku. Locked in a gaze with the legendary Inajimon deity, Teresa felt a chill crawl down her spine. Clenching her teeth, she grabbed Luo Qing's hand, intending to jump off the balcony with him. But before she could move, a bolt of lightning struck the ground, blocking their path. Turning back, she saw the Raiden Shogun, sword in hand, staring coldly at them. In a panic, Teresa steeled herself and yelled, "No time, my lord. I'll cover you. Natalia and the others are waiting outside to assist you." "I said, Teresa." Luo Qing patted her shoulder, about to speak, but Teresa cut him off. "Luo Qing-sama, don't worry about me. Just go." Hearing her self-sacrificing tone, Luo Qing wasn't sure whether to feel touched or annoyed. "I was saying." Before he could continue, the Raiden Shogun acted first, slashing her blade toward Teresa without hesitation. Teresa's thunder manifestations rushed forward, firing volleys of electro-orbs at the Shogun in an attempt to protect their master. But they were shredded instantly by the violet lightning. In a blink, the blade was at Teresa's head. "My life is overweight, hey." Teresa braced herself for death, closing her eyes tightly, but after a moment of silence, she opened one eye to peek. She saw Luo Qing, holding his spear, blocking the Shogun's blade. "Luo Qing-sama, why did you save me? You need to go. If you escape, even if I die, I..." Teresa spoke frantically. She and her companions had risked everything, even their lives, to storm the Tenshukaku and free Luo Qing. Her life belonged to him, and if she could ensure his escape, she'd gladly sacrifice herself. But if he didn't leave, all their efforts would be in vain. "Who said anything about dying?" Luo Qing interrupted. "But, Luo Qing-sama, you..." Before Teresa could finish, the Raiden Shogun slashed again, sidestepping Luo Qing to target Teresa. She was an unfeeling puppet, and even if it meant cutting down her own creator, she would do so if their wills clashed. There was no hesitation in striking down an intruder like Teresa. Fortunately, Luo Qing was quick, intercepting her once more. "This is a misunderstanding," Luo Qing shouted at the Shogun. But the Raiden Shogun paid him no mind, circling around him to strike at Teresa again. "Damn it," Luo Qing muttered, frustrated. Activating Time Zero, he moved to block her once more. The two clashed, moving so fast that to the naked eye, they appeared as nothing more than flickers of light. Teresa could only hear the rapid metallic clashes around her. She had always known Luo Qing was strong, but witnessing it firsthand still left her stunned. The stalemate dragged on. It seemed the Raiden Shogun was deliberately avoiding harming Luo Qing, but she wasn't letting up her attacks. Being a puppet, she had infinite stamina, so she could keep this up indefinitely. Luo Qing, on the other hand, couldn't. Sustaining Time Zero at maximum intensity put a severe strain on his mind and body. "Can't we just stop and talk this out?" Luo Qing pleaded. "Humph." The only response was the Raiden Shogun's cold snort. "Don't push me." "Humph. I'm warning you, don't push me." "Humph. You leave me no choice." Realizing that words were futile, Luo Qing sighed internally and accessed his system's inventory. Ding! Used Affection Boost Card Pro Max. Affection increased. Raiden Shogun, plus 15. EI, plus 15. Total affection. Raiden Shogun, 52.5. EI, 45. The Raiden Shogun's body suddenly stiffened. She dropped to one knee, supporting herself with her sword, her chest heaving, her face tinged with a blush. Damn this fluttering heart! Meanwhile, in the plain of Euthymia, Ei's hand trembled as she held her light novel. Pressing her hand to her chest, her face flushed, she whispered softly. "Luo Qing, it was you, after all." Chapter 119, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 119. 52.5. Just a little more, over 60, and she'd be seeing hearts in her eyes. Luo Qing looked at the Raiden Shogun, who was kneeling before him, and shook his head slightly. "Why did you have to push me this far? Forcing things like this was too crude." He preferred to take things slow and steady. "All right, my dear general, can we have a proper conversation now?" Luo Qing squatted down in front of the Raiden Shogun, leveling his gaze with hers. Then, to Teresa's shock, he reached out and patted the Shogun's head. He petted her as if she were a purple kitten, rather than the cold and fearsome god of thunder. I knew it was you." The Raiden Shogun's face turned a deep shade of red, her breath hitching softly. There was a hint of shame and anger in her eyes as she looked at Luo Qing. Fine, I admit it was me. But who told you to keep attacking without stopping? As he spoke, Luo Qing continued to gently ruffle her hair. How did you manage this? Because I'm handsome. Frustration value +1 from the Raiden Shogun. Confusion filled the Raiden Shogun's heart. Aren't I just a puppet? How could I have such strange feelings? She was a being equal to the gods. How had Luo Qing done this to her? Luo Qing-sama, she. Go get Natalia and the others. It's fine now. Oh okay. Not long after. The 4-member rescue squad gathered in the Tenshukaku, kneeling in a row on the tatami. Before them, Luo Qing sat on the elevated platform, his gaze complicated as he looked down at the group. The Raiden Shogun sat beside him, her hands clasped together, looking uncharacteristically docile. You all. Luo Qing's voice was calm. Didn't I teach you better than this? How could you be so sloppy with your intel? The 4 knelt, shivering, not daring to make a sound. Don't you all know my strength by now? I was eating well, drinking well, and who said I was about to be executed in public? Teresa timidly raised her hand. It was the eldest daughter of the Yashiro Commission, she said, by an Ajuman law, disturbing the vision hunt ceremony so severely usually warrants a public execution. Yes, Luo Qing-sama. She's the one who gave us the information, saying that you were being held alone in the Tenshukaku. Frustration value +1 from Luo Qing. Luo Qing was speechless. He didn't want to use another affection card on the Raiden Shogun. Those cards increased affection forcibly, with no build-up. If he used too many, it would definitely turn into a Yandere situation. Moreover, the Raiden Shogun, being a puppet with limited emotions, could react unpredictably if she ever caught him being affectionate with another woman. He did not want to face her wrath. He could already imagine her chasing him down with a blade. Natalia, what did you see me doing in that mirror just now? It looked like you were lying down, reading a light novel. And do you think that's what someone about to be executed looks like? Natalia lowered her head, nervously fidgeting behind her. Then, she pointed at Teresa to deflect blame. My lord, it was Teresa who said that according to Liyue's traditions, you might have been having a last meal before execution, and that we needed to hurry to rescue you before it was too late. Luo Qing's gaze turned to Teresa. My lord, I was just worried. How was I supposed to know you could? Teresa looked bashful. She never imagined that her lord's charm was so immense that he could even win over the legendary Raiden Shogun. Moments ago, the Shogun was a cold and aloof figure, but now she had transformed into a gentle and compliant woman. That was the god of thunder. Win over who? All right, stand up. Luo Qing sighed softly, his tone lightening. Whatever the case, your intentions were good. You can head back for now. I'll reward all of you properly when I return. No matter what, his subordinates had risked their lives to rescue him, even daring to challenge a deity. That moved him deeply. Though their efforts had been somewhat misplaced, he still intended to reward their loyalty. Otherwise, what kind of leader would he be? Yes, my lord. They responded in unison. Just as they were about to leave, Teresa looked back with a concerned expression. What about you, my lord? I have some business to take care of. I'll return later. Oh. After they departed, Luo Qing turned to the Raiden Shogun, resting his chin on his hand with a playful glint in his eye. Thank you for sparing them, my dear general. Don't call me that. The Raiden Shogun's face was bright red as she looked away, casting a brief glance at Luo Qing before quickly averting her eyes. By now, she had fully absorbed the effects of the latest affection card. She could no longer pretend to be aloof with Luo Qing. Whenever their eyes met, she couldn't help but want to nestle into his arms. She was the Raiden Shogun, for goodness sake. How could she behave like this? But it was so hard to resist. Then what should I call you? My sweet little darling. Ugh, don't call me that either. All right, I'll stop teasing. Luo Qing chuckled, eager to see just how far this 52.5 affection rating could push the Raiden Shogun. Give me your hand. Wah. Your hand. MHM. Suppressing her inner turmoil, the Raiden Shogun slowly extended her right hand. The moment she did, Luo Qing's fingers interlocked with hers, holding her hand firmly. MMM. The Raiden Shogun lowered her head, not resisting at all. All right. Luo Qing studied her expression and, after a moment's thought, decided to push further. I'm feeling a bit tired. General, could you give me a lap pillow? The Raiden Shogun's blush deepened, but she nodded, unable to resist. Chapter 120, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 120. The Raiden Shogun leaned back slightly, kneeling on the tatami mat. Her deep purple stockings exposed a glimpse of pale, soft skin, delicate and smooth. Well then, I won't hold back. Luo Qing chuckled lightly as he leaned back against the Raiden Shogun and slowly lay down. The next moment, the back of his head met a warm, soft sensation. It was like the best pillow in the world. The thighs were a sensitive area for any girl, and this was the first time the Raiden Shogun had been touched in such a forbidden, sensitive place by a man. The moment Luo Qing settled in, she couldn't suppress a light moan. Even though she was a puppet of the god of thunder, right now, she felt a shudder run through her entire body as if electrified. Ah, this is nice. Luo Qing closed his eyes and let out a heartfelt sigh. There was no denying it, a lap pillow was pure bliss. Sensing eyes on him, Luo Qing opened his own to find the Raiden Shogun looking down at him, her face tinged with a rosy blush. Caught in the act, she quickly averted her gaze, pretending to admire the scenery around them. Her shy and flustered expression was worlds apart from the cold and aloof general she usually presented. Hey, General, while I had my eyes closed, were you peeking at me just now? Luo Qing teased with a playful grin. I. The Raiden Shogun glanced away, the blush on her face deepening. So, General, can you look at me when you talk? This. Alright. The Raiden Shogun's body was stiff as she slowly lowered her head, meeting Luo Qing's gaze. At that moment, their eyes locked. Her heartbeat quickened, filled with a growing desire. I want. After lying there for a while. Seeing that the Raiden Shogun was comfortable with providing a lap pillow, Luo Qing decided it was time to push things further. After savoring the warmth of her lap for a little longer, he sat up and patted his own thigh. Well then, it's my turn to give you a lap pillow now, General. The Raiden Shogun looked shocked, glancing at his lap before swallowing nervously. She had managed Inajima in place of Ei for centuries, but never before had she experienced such a turbulent surge of emotions. Come on, don't be shy. Luo Qing patted his thigh again. He could only enjoy lying down passively, but if she lay down she'd be entirely at his mercy. With a slightly stiff movement, the Raiden Shogun nodded. Her body tense, she slowly lay down. From the moment she was created until now, she had never given or received a lap pillow. As she touched Luo Qing's thigh, her heart raced, and a warmth spread throughout her body. Luo Qing's thigh wasn't as soft as a woman's, a bit firmer, a poor pillow choice, perhaps. But as a position, a little higher. Following Luo Qing's instructions, the Raiden Shogun adjusted herself, resting her head higher on his thigh. She had barely settled when, without warning, Luo Qing's hands cupped her cheeks, his fingers gently tracing her soft, pale skin. What are you? Don't speak. Luo Qing looked down at the Raiden Shogun, their eyes meeting once again. But she couldn't hold his gaze for more than a second, immediately looking away, her embarrassment clear. Ah, that sweet shyness. Seeing the Raiden Shogun's reaction, Luo Qing's mind began to race. Physical intimacy between couples usually progresses from light to deep, and since she didn't seem to mind the lap pillow, he considered testing the next step. After a moment's thought, he held her cheeks firmly, ensuring she couldn't turn away. Their eyes met once more, and a silent understanding seemed to pass between them. There's a chance. Excitement welled up in Luo Qing's chest. He swallowed hard and slowly lowered his head. Their faces drew closer, and their breaths mingled as they were about to touch. But just as they were about to kiss, the Raiden Shogun's expression suddenly changed. She swiftly pulled away from Luo Qing's embrace, a mix of shame and anger flashing in her eyes. Before he could react, she slapped him hard across the face and retreated several paces, clutching her chest to prevent her robe from slipping off her shoulders. Luo Qing had tried to undress her without her noticing. The knot of her sash had almost been untied. Had she not reacted quickly, he might have succeeded. You're too much, trying to undress me. The Raiden Shogun glared at Luo Qing, her eyes burning with both fury and embarrassment. I didn't mean to, it's just a force of habit. A habit? Well, I'm very skilled at removing clothes. Luo Qing looked a bit sheepish. He wasn't sure why he did it either. They were supposed to test out a simple kiss, but before he knew it, his hands had slipped to the knot at her back. I've never undressed a girl in a kimono before. Why did it feel so familiar? Frustration value +1 from the Raiden Shogun. Leave now. The Raiden Shogun readjusted her sash and pulled her collar up, turning her back to Luo Qing. Her purpose was to govern Inajima, not to engage in this flirtatious behavior with Luo Qing. If she didn't use her anger now to drive him away, she knew she'd soon be too weak to resist. Then, she'd never be able to leave Tenshukaku, abandoning her responsibilities. After all, someone was still watching her from the plane of Euthymia. Oh? Sending me away so soon, General? Luo Qing crossed his arms and teased, could it be that you can't bear to see me go? I'm only granting your wish to leave, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, still facing away from him. She couldn't afford to look at him, not now. If she did, she feared her resolve would crumble entirely. All right then, I'll come visit you next time, General. Luo Qing gave a light-hearted smile, then turned and leapt from the balcony, heading towards Hanamizaka. He had stayed in Tenshukaku long enough. While the affection cards had raised the Shogun's and Ei's goodwill to a level where physical contact was possible, he still had concerns. He wouldn't act recklessly with forced affection while he wasn't strong enough to definitively control both the Shogun and Ei. Like just now trying to undress the Raiden Shogun. No one knew if she was wearing anything underneath. If she hadn't been, it might have ended in a lot more than a slap. After Luo Qing left, the Raiden Shogun returned to her high seat, glancing briefly at the balcony to confirm that he was truly gone. A strange sense of loss welled up in her heart.
Thanks for listening.